Hey guys, tonight we step into a world of flickering torchlight, soggy wool cloaks, and floors that creak like they're actively judging your life choices. You're arriving at a medieval inn, mud-splattered, half-frozen, and vaguely smelling of horse. The fog hangs thick over the countryside, and the stars are smothered behind a stubborn cloud bank. You're not entirely sure how long you've been walking, but your boots squelch like they're filled with soup, and there's something wet dripping down the back of your neck that you're pretty sure isn't rain. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and your local time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push through the warped wooden gate into the inn yard. The door doesn't creak. It wails like it's mourning every soul who's passed through. It's just gone midnight, and the only light comes from a lantern hanging by a frayed rope, swaying slightly in the wind. The air is heavy with the scent of manure and something else. Wet dog, maybe wet bear. The inn before you is crooked, squat, and slouched in on itself like a drunk after last call. A wooden sign swings above the door, barely visible in the gloom, but you can just make out the shape of what looks like a hedgehog holding a tankard. Charming. The prickled pig, perhaps. You reach for the heavy oak door, knock once, and then again, louder. Silence. Then, finally, a shuffling sound. A latch clicks, the door creaks open and reveals absolutely nothing for a second. Then two pale eyes emerge from the dark, followed by a nose redder than a boiled beet and a mouth that clearly specializes in grunting. The innkeeper grumbles at you, rubbing sleep from his face with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for scraping barnacles off a ship. "You lost?" he says, though it sounds more like "you lush." You shake your head and fumble for your coin pouch. He eyes it like it might bite him. There's a long pause, then, grudgingly, he steps aside and lets you in. The warmth hits you like a surprise hug, one that smells like smoke, onions, and sweat. The common room is small and dark, with a central hearth throwing more shadows than light. A blackened pot hangs over the fire, gently burbling something thick and vaguely beige. A couple of figures are slumped at a table, snoring softly into their own arms. A dog raises its head, decides you're not worth the energy, and goes back to sleep. You glance down and realize you're standing in a puddle. The floor's not just muddy, it's practically artisanal sludge, pressed from the finest countryside muck and years of unwashed boots. The innkeeper squints at you again. "Full," he mutters, then snorts like he just told the best joke of the evening. But you can sleep in the loft, or the bench, or, if you like the smell of turnips, there's a spot by the root cellar. You choose the loft. Mostly because it sounds slightly less like a euphemism for rat buffet. He hands you a candle stub and gestures to a narrow stair that might technically count as vertical firewood. As you ascend, the steps moan and shift, like they're reconsidering their entire career path. At the top is a low-ceilinged hallway, well, more of a corridor-shaped attic with straw poking through the boards and beams low enough to concuss a duck. Your room is a space the width of your arm span, curtained off with what looks like a retired sailcloth. Inside is a pile of straw, two coarse woolen blankets, and, bonus, a sleeping goat tethered to a bucket. The goat eyes you suspiciously, then resumes chewing what might be an old sandal. You lie down slowly, grateful for any horizontal surface, but deeply aware that you've just signed up for a night of medieval spa treatments, hay in your ears, burlap rash, and the occasional mysterious bite. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. Inside, your fellow guests snore in polyphonic harmony, one with a wet wheeze, one with a high whistle, and someone who sounds like they're gargling gravel. Historians still argue whether inns at this time provided hospitable lodging or were more like begrudging shelters for people who couldn't afford to bribe a castle guard for barn space. What we do know is that by the 13th century, inns had become essential hubs, places where news, trade, gossip, and livestock collided under one sagging roof. Inns were sometimes licensed by the local lord or the church, and those licenses could be revoked for offences ranging from harbouring criminals to serving watered-down ale, which, let's be honest, was probably the real crime here. There's even a surviving 14th century record of an inn fined for lodging Flemish weavers with suspect intentions. What those intentions were, well, the goat probably knows. The straw beneath you crackles as you shift. You try not to think about what might be nesting deeper inside. A flea bites your ankle. You sigh. So this is how heroes sleep, you muse, blanketed in hay, serenaded by drunks and watched over by a goat named Wait. Is there a tag? Yes. Her name's Matilda. Outside you hear distant hooves on the road, someone else coming late. Maybe a knight returning from crusade, or just a farmer who lost track of time. You'll never know. The door creaks open again. A gust of wind, then silence. You try to settle in. The air smells of smoke, wood, unwashed wool, and the ghost of something roasted a week ago. You pull the blanket tighter and listen to the soft drip of rain against the shingles. Somewhere deep below, a barmaid is still scrubbing tankards and cursing quietly at a stubborn stain. And up here, under a roof built before your great-grandparents were even concepts, you finally, almost, start to fall asleep, until Matilda sneezes hay in your face. Section 2. The goat snuffles in her sleep. You, on the other hand, are still horizontal, but very much awake. That last sneeze smelled strongly of yesterday's pottage and possibly fear. You roll away from her, only to discover that your blanket doesn't roll with you. It's tucked beneath a hay bale, which itself seems to have ambitions of permanence. You sigh and stare up at the rafters, where a spider the size of a fingernail is weaving a web with more purpose than your entire last year. Downstairs, the noise begins again. Not loud, not chaotic, but just enough to let you know that sleep is more of a courtesy here than a guarantee. Footsteps on wood, the crackle of fire being stoked, a yawn that turns into a cough and then into a curse. The innkeeper is awake. You trudge down the narrow steps in search of warmth or distraction or both. The common room is dim, lit by the rekindled hearth and one stubborn candle that clearly didn't survive the night unscathed. The innkeeper stands by the fireplace, one hand on his lower back, the other stirring something in a cauldron with a stick that may once have been a broom handle. He doesn't greet you so much as glance and grunt, a language that in this inn counts as polite small talk. Fire went low, he mutters. Had to chase out the coals with my shoe. He gestures vaguely toward the benches. You sit not so much on a seat as a warped plank of oak that has clearly hosted centuries of weary behinds. The wood is warm from the fire, and you lean toward it, feeling the heat soak into your bones. After a few minutes, he turns to you again. Paid for a bed. Didn't pay for a meal, you blink, he shrugs. But it's cold. And you look pathetic, hospitality at its finest. He ladles something from the pot into a chipped wooden bowl and hands it over. It smells like root vegetables, faintly charred cabbage, and optimistically, pork. You take a cautious sip and realize it's actually not bad. Salty, earthy, and with an aftertaste of something smoky, possibly intentional. The innkeeper sits beside you, groaning as he lowers himself onto a three-legged stool. His beard is unkempt, greyish-brown, and catches the firelight like moss on old bark. He studies you, eyes narrowed. Where are you coming from? You name a nearby town. He grunts. Long way. Dangerous road, bandits, wolves, worse. He sips from his own bowl and stares into the fire. Last week, a tanner came through, said he saw a will-o'-the-wisp dancing across the marshes, followed it. Lost his mule, swears the thing whispered in Latin. You nod solemnly. It's too early or too late to argue about folklore. The truth is, innkeepers were more than just glorified landlords. In medieval times, they were gatekeepers, newsbrokers, and sometimes low-level intelligence agents. People passed through their doors with stories, secrets, and occasionally a stolen relic or forged indulgence tucked inside their boots. This particular innkeeper seems to know everything about everyone. He rattles off the names of those who passed through this week alone: a merchant hauling velvet, a priest with one eye, a woman pretending to be a nun, and a travelling cheese expert who didn't seem to know much about cheese. Most folk lie, he says, as if it's a compliment. But they pay, so what do I care? He spits into the fire. It sizzles. You notice that his eyes keep darting toward a door behind the hearth. A thick wooden slab with a rusted latch and hinges that look like they've been hammered flat by a very enthusiastic blacksmith. What's back there, you ask. He narrows his eyes. Root cellar, you wait. He shrugs, and supplies. Tools, wine, sometimes, none of your concern. Well then, that clears that up. Historians still argue whether medieval inns operated as strictly secular enterprises or occasionally veered into under-the-table dealings, black market relics, heretical texts, or fugitive clergy. What's not debated is the fact that inns were places where boundaries blurred. between classes, between regions, between law, and whatever someone could get away with when the sheriff was drunk or busy. The innkeeper stands with a groan and disappears behind the bar. You hear him rummaging, muttering something about dried leeks and ungrateful guests. You take the chance to look around. The common room is, in a way, cozy. Smoke-stained beams crisscross the ceiling. The walls are hung with mismatched linens and fading tapestries, one of which appears to feature a very dramatic goose. A single high window lets in the first hints of grey dawn. You stretch. The fire crackles. Somewhere behind the walls, a mouse squeaks and is swiftly shushed by something larger. You choose not to investigate. The innkeeper returns with a dusty cup of something steaming. He hands it to you with a raised eyebrow. "Drink that," he says. "Warms the blood." Or thickens it, can't remember which. You take a sip. It tastes like bitter herbs, boiled apple, and the sort of spice that hides its punch until your third swallow. Your sinuses clear instantly. He eyes your reaction, smirks faintly, then moves to stoke the fire again. As he does, the door bangs open and a shape lumbers in, wrapped in a soaked cloak, trailing a mist of cold air and horse sweat. The innkeeper doesn't flinch. "Back early," he mutters. The figure tosses back the hood, revealing a woman with wild grey hair and a face like crumpled parchment. "Slept in a ditch," she says, teeth chattering. "Better than last time." The innkeeper grunts and waves a hand toward the hearth. She shuffles over, nods at you, and sinks onto the bench. You realize she's barefoot, her toes are blue. She doesn't seem to care. The innkeeper vanishes again, then returns with another bowl of the morning brew. She takes it without a word and slurps it like it's the best thing she's ever tasted. You glance between them. "Friend of yours?" he snorts. "She's the tanner with the mule." Or without the mule now. The woman sighs. "It wasn't a will-o'-the-wisp. It was two kids with a lantern and a grudge." You try not to laugh. She grins anyway. The fire burns higher. Outside, the sky is soft grey, streaked with faint colour. Morning has arrived, though the sun seems reluctant to participate. You sit with your stew, your strange tea, and your new not-friends in the warm heart of a building that has seen more than you probably ever will. And for a moment, just a moment, you feel the tiniest bit like you belong here. Then the goat on the stairs sneezes again. Section 3. The goat sneezes with theatrical flair, her echo bouncing off the walls like a polite ghost trying to get your attention. The tanner glances up, unbothered, and mutters something about needing fewer animals and more soap in this place. The innkeeper shrugs. "Matilda pays in milk, you don't." And just like that, the rhythm of the inn continues, indifferent to your presence. It's properly morning now. The light outside is still filtered through clouds, giving everything that vague, milky haze that makes time feel like it's standing still. Somewhere a rooster crows, late to the party and clearly unimpressed about it. You stand, stretch your back, loud pops, and make your way to the door. The innkeeper doesn't stop you. He just says, "Breakfast's when the fire burns low," and disappears into a side room, probably to harass the firewood. The courtyard is slick with dew and last night's rain. The inn's outer buildings form a crooked horseshoe around the muddy yard, a stable with a roof that seems to hover more out of habit than structural integrity, a lean-to that smells strongly of old hay and fresh regret, and a coop with chickens that look like they've already seen too much today. And across from it all, a squat outhouse squats back, daring you. You take care of what needs taking care of. Let's not get too detailed here. It's morning, after all. Let's just say the medieval bathroom experience makes you reconsider everything you ever complained about in modern plumbing. Cold air, rough wood, suspicious spiders. You survive, barely. Now it's time to explore. You stroll the yard, taking in the sensory collage, wet earth squishing beneath your boots, distant bleating from sheep on a nearby hill, the scent of damp wood mingled with something faintly metallic, blacksmith's forge maybe. Somewhere off to the side, a man is splitting logs with the slow, methodical pace of someone who's either very hungover or philosophically opposed to haste. You wave, he ignores you. At one corner of the yard stands a covered well. The bucket creaks slightly as it dangles above the dark water. You peek in, half expecting a face to look back. Thankfully, it's just water, and maybe a leaf. Hopefully a leaf. A younger girl emerges from the stable, her hair tucked under a lopsided kerchief. She's carrying a pail sloshing with something suspiciously chunky. You wisely avoid eye contact. She dumps it behind the coop, nods once at you, then vanishes inside again. There's a rhythm to life here, you realize. Everyone moves with purpose, or at least resignation. The inn isn't just a place to eat and sleep, it's a microcosm of medieval daily life, and everyone has a role, even if it's make sure the goat doesn't eat the kindling. You wander back inside. The fire has calmed to a red, glowing bed of coals, and true to the innkeeper's word, breakfast seems to be happening. Bowls of porridge are being handed out, thick, lumpy, and exactly as appetizing as a beige paste can manage. You take one and sit beside the tanner, who has removed exactly one boot and is aggressively inspecting her heel. "Blisters," she mutters, as if you'd asked. 3 days on the road with a limp mule and one soggy boot. Had to walk half the way. You nod sympathetically and eat your porridge. It's surprisingly filling, if not inspiring. The innkeeper thumps a jug of watered ale on the table with all the ceremony of a royal decree. You pour yourself a cup, sip it, and wince. It tastes like flat bread and slightly old dreams. "Best batch this month," the innkeeper says dryly. "Last one fermented into vinegar." Useful, though, took rust off the latch. Despite the sarcasm, there's something comforting in the ritual of it all, the slow, shared beginning to a day. The creak of chairs, the scrape of spoons, the occasional grunt of vague approval. You realize this is breakfast in its purest form: survival, community, and low expectations. Mainstream historians agree that food in a medieval inn was rarely elaborate, but always functional. Bread, cheese, pottage, ale, and, if you were lucky, bits of leftover meat from the Lord's manor or a small roast from local game. The hearth was the centre of not just heat, but nourishment. Meals weren't just fuel, they were time markers. Breakfast when the fire lowered, dinner when the light died, supper if you were feeling fancy or flush. You finish your bowl and lean back, staring into the embers. The innkeeper's son appears now, skinny, sharp-eyed, and clearly too clever for the broom he's pretending to sweep with. He glances at you and then, with all the smugness of youth, says, "You the one snoring like a dying cow last night?" The tanner snorts into her cup. You glare mildly. He grins and disappears upstairs, his broom scraping behind him like a smug little shadow. "Don't mind him," the innkeeper says. "He hasn't been kicked by a mule yet." Outside, the day brightens to a weak silver. Rain threatens but hasn't committed. A merchant cart clatters past the front gate. You hear it, more than see it, the wooden wheels juddering across ruts like they're trying to start a fire. 2 dogs bark, the chickens scatter, business as usual. You think about leaving, hitting the road, seeing what lies beyond this sleepy crossroads. But something tugs at you to stay a bit longer, to observe maybe, or simply to digest your porridge without the risk of sudden movement. The innkeeper is fixing a loose board near the bar now, humming something off-key. The old tanner is arguing with the girl from the stable about the merits of drying socks over the fire versus under your armpits. It's a strangely intense debate. The goat, for her part, is trying to chew on a discarded spoon. And you're caught in a moment that feels both completely ordinary and quietly magical. Historians still argue whether daily life in medieval inns was miserable or manageable. The truth is probably both. These weren't resorts, they were stopovers, lifelines, shelters from storm and solitude. Places where farmers, merchants, rogues, pilgrims, and plague survivors all crossed paths, shared warmth, traded lies, and maybe, if they were lucky, left with fewer fleas than they came in with. The innkeeper finally wedges the loose board back into place with a grunt. "There," he says, satisfied. "Good for another 100 guests, or until someone steps on it sideways." You glance down. Of course, it's the board directly under your chair. You smile, set your empty bowl aside, and try not to shift your weight too much. And in that quiet pause between clatter and chores, you realize this inn, with all its creaks and grumbles and goats, might just be the most alive place you've seen in a long time. Section 4. The door swings open again. Not a bang, not a creak, just a low, groaning sigh of old wood moving out of the way, and in walks a new arrival. He's soaked to the knees, cloaked in mud, and clearly wearing what used to be a very proud green tunic. Now it's the colour of disappointment. You glance up from your seat near the hearth, and so does the goat, chewing contemplatively on the innkeeper's broom. The man shuffles in, trailing little leaf-shaped bits of muck, and drops a leather satchel onto the table with the long-suffering plop of someone who's spent the night arguing with rain. The innkeeper doesn't even look up. "Shoes off." The man kicks off his boots with surprising speed. Shoe, he corrects. Lost the left one to the marsh. He squints at you. You the one that stole the tanner's spot. You shake your head. I'm just passing through. Aren't we all? He mutters, sitting heavily beside the goat, who gives him a long-suffering bleat and moves 2 inches away, as if she has standards. He pulls a coin from his belt, small, dull, and slightly bent, and slaps it on the counter. I want a meal, a bed, and no questions. The innkeeper finally looks over. You'll get porridge, a floor, and 1 question answered for free. More'll cost you. The man laughs without mirth. Sounds like home. You watch as the innkeeper ladles yet more porridge from a pot that appears bottomless. He plops it in front of the newcomer and adds a hunk of bread, tough, dark, and perfect for self-defense if things go poorly. You lean in. Bad night? The man scoffs. Bad week. Horse died. Then my cartwheel snapped. Then the axle gave out. Then it rained. Then the mule bit me. Then I found out the road was closed by some minor lord whose title is longer than his sword. You blink. So you walked? Dragged, he says. Dragged what I could. Left the rest behind. He rips the bread in half and chews it like he's trying to end a feud. And then the mule ran off. You nod. The goat bleats again, unimpressed by his tragedy. It's moments like this that remind you of the reality of medieval travel. Roads weren't smooth veins of civilization. They were muddy veins of chaos. Travelers were at the mercy of everything. Weather, wild animals, nobles with grudges, toll collectors with sharp sticks, and bandits with sharper ones. And that's if they were lucky. Even the most mundane journeys were quests in themselves. There were no maps worth trusting, no signs, and no guarantees. And while monasteries and abbeys might offer hospitality, most travellers relied on inns like this, halfway sanctuaries where the beds were short, the ale was warm, and the rumours were scalding. Speaking of which, as the stranger eats, the tanner leans across the table. You didn't come from Briar Hollow, did you? He looks up warily. Passed near it. Why? She leans in like she's about to share a conspiracy. Any truth to the story that Lady Esmira's son eloped with a barmaid and ran off with the dowry chest? The man chuckles despite himself. I heard it was a stable boy, and they didn't run far, only as far as Old Mill Bridge. Locals caught them and made them marry on the spot. Dowry's still missing, though. The stable girl sighs. Romantic. The tanner snorts. Idiotic. The innkeeper, without looking up from where he's now hammering nails into a loose beam, adds, if they married at Old Mill Bridge, then they're likely living with the ferryman. That poor man's hosted more disgraced lovers than he's got teeth. Historians still argue whether inns were true centres of gossip or simply convenient places where people repeated the same 5 stories in different accents. Either way, news travelled faster than letters, and more often by ale than by ink. The conversation shifts. A mention of a wolf pack spotted near the southern woods, a debate over whether the local miller is watering his flour, a claim that the apothecary's daughter is really a hedge witch, though she's been extremely helpful with sheep births lately, so no one's pressing charges. The traveller, now halfway through his porridge and officially out of complaints, slumps back and sighs. So, this inn got a name. The innkeeper wipes his hands on a cloth that's more whole than fabric. Locals just call it the stoop. As in, where you stoop to eat, stoop to sleep, and stoop to leave when you realise your boots are missing. The man chuckles. Fitting. Outside, the rain returns, pattering softly on the roof in that insistent, rhythmic way that makes you grateful to be indoors. The fire pops. The goat farts, quietly, and the tanner curses under her breath. You stretch again, wondering if maybe it's time to ask about staying a second night. Just one more. For research, obviously, the innkeeper sees the look on your face and points a spoon at you. No discounts for lingering. And if you're going to keep stealing the goat's heat, you'd better share your bread. You break off a crust and offer it to Matilda. She sniffs, sneezes again, then daintily accepts it like a queen acknowledging your tribute. There's a certain comfort here, a chaotic harmony of worn boots, rough wool, bad jokes, and slightly fermented facts. You're not part of this world, not really. But for now, you're wrapped inside it, and it hums gently around you, like a lullaby made of mud, smoke, and the distant clatter of a cartwheel limping into town. The traveller leans back, looks around, and sighs. This isn't the worst place I've slept. You smirk. That's the review they're going to carve above the door. The innkeeper chuckles for the first time today. Wouldn't be the first. And with that, the fire crackles, the rain sings, and the day settles into a pattern you didn't expect to find comforting, but somehow, against the odds, is. Section 5. Rain still pecks gently at the windows, each drop ticking time forward in its own lazy, looping rhythm. Outside, the world remains an ambiguous blur of grey light and puddled road, but inside the stoop, things are getting a little more animated. The midday lull begins to pass, and with it comes the inn's truest purpose. Not sleep, not porridge, not even goat-based companionship, but people. It starts subtly. A creak from the door, a gust of air scented like pine and manure. A stranger with eyebrows like storm clouds ducks into the room, claps the water from his cloak and looks around like he's counting potential threats. He nods once, an act of greeting or warning, hard to tell, and heads for the hearth. Then two more arrive, a pair of friars, robes damp and feet absolutely done with existing. They shed their hoods in unison, revealing bald heads, thin smiles, and the kind of cheer that only comes from making it through mud without losing your temper or your sandals. By God's wet elbows, one says, wringing out his sleeve. It's drier in here than in St. Cuthbert's ossuary. The other nods sagely. That's because we buried the roof beams with the bones. People chuckle. They always do. It's not that the joke is good, it's just that in medieval inns, laughter was a group effort. It kept the fleas in check and the spirits from dropping through the floorboards. You slide over to make room as the friars settle in beside you. They radiate the kind of warmth born from walking too far, eating too little, and being too grateful to complain. One of them hands you a flask, mead, not strong. Just holy. You take a sip, it tastes like honey, herbs, and barely contained regret, not bad. The inn's main room is filling now, and not just with bodies. Voices rise, someone starts tuning a rebec, badly. The smell of damp wool mingles with roast onions and the unmistakable tang of wet leather. A pair of woodcutters haul in a bundle of firewood unasked and dump it near the hearth with a shared grunt of satisfaction. One of them then promptly steps in goat poop and accepts it like fate. Welcome to Medieval Social Hour. It's important to understand that inns weren't just rest stops, they were the social hubs of the rural world. Courier stations, market stalls, job fairs, confession booths, and occasional wedding venues. In places where town halls were rare and courtyards muddy, the inn served as the default public square. The tanner, still seated and still one boot off, is now deep in conversation with the friars about the morality of charging double for plague-resistant shoes. The traveller from earlier has removed his sock and is inspecting a blister the size of a walnut. You wisely look away. In the corner, a new voice rises, a woman with hands like oak roots and a laugh like falling apples. She's gesturing broadly as she speaks to the innkeeper, and her accent places her from the next shire over. A cloth merchant, you gather, judging by the bolts of fabric she's carefully leaning against the wall, wrapped against the damp like precious relics. The innkeeper says something you can't quite catch. She responds, "My wool doesn't shrink in the rain." "It's already as small as your patience." Everyone laughs, including the goat, and now someone has started clapping. The rebec player, miraculously in tune this time, launches into a folksy, meandering tune, half lullaby, half march, and boots begin tapping under tables. The friars clap in time, the tanner hums a harmony, the cloth merchant snaps her fingers, and even the grumpy one-shoed traveller manages a foot tap that doesn't cause visible pain. No one's dancing yet, but the mood is lifting like bread in a warm oven. Historians still argue whether medieval inn music was more structured performance or spontaneous jam session. In reality, it was probably both. What mattered wasn't finesse, it was familiarity. If you could hum the tune, slap a rhythm on the table, or stomp in time, you belonged. Now, of course, not everyone's thrilled. The older man in the corner, silent so far, eyes sunken and face like worn leather, mutters something about noise and fools. He's ignored. He probably wants it that way. Every inn had its local ghost, alive or otherwise. This one just drinks more. At some point, someone passes you a bowl. You don't ask what's in it. It smells like leeks, barley, and something suspiciously gamey. You take a bite. It's surprisingly good. Possibly pigeon, possibly not. Food here isn't fancy, but it serves its purpose. Warm, hearty, and shareable. Dishes are passed without fuss. Ale flows from jugs as they're topped off with a shrug. There's no menu, no waitstaff, and certainly no tipping. What you get is what you get, and you're lucky to have it. The innkeeper moves through the room like a captain steering a very leaky, very lively ship. He refills, he grumbles, he points a ladle at the cloth merchant when she starts to climb onto a bench. "Don't break it, that's my good bench." She ignores him and begins reciting a poem about a lovesick blacksmith and a very confused goose. Somewhere in the middle of the third stanza, the fire pops loudly, as if the building itself is laughing along. You lean back, your shoulders sinking into the hard wooden bench that somehow feels more comfortable than your bed did last night. Maybe it's the heat. Maybe it's the mead. Maybe it's the simple pleasure of being in a room where people are being people. Flawed, loud, funny, tired, alive. And that's the thing about medieval inns. They were snapshots of the world pressed into low ceilings and soot-dark beams. Travellers, traders, outlaws, monks, they all passed through here, and in these fleeting moments they weren't enemies or strangers, they were survivors, they were stories in motion. The music fades. The rebec player stops to cough dramatically and announces he'll accept coin, compliments, or kisses. He receives 2 of the first, 1 of the second, and a thrown crust of bread that might have been a compliment if you squint. The friars rise, dust themselves off, and begin offering blessings in exchange for bread and gossip. They gather quite a lot of both. The rain picks up outside, thudding harder now. But inside it's warm, loud, and weirdly beautiful. You realize it's nearing dusk. Shadows crawl across the floor like cats looking for a place to nap. The innkeeper is starting to push chairs back toward the hearth, creating more space, anticipating the night crowd. Candles are lit, tiny halos of gold that make the whole room look like a painting that smells slightly of goat. You glance toward the door. You could leave. The rain's just water after all. The road's just mud and ruts and the occasional angry goose, but you don't. Not yet. Because you're not just passing through anymore. Tonight, you belong to the stoop. Section 6. By the time true night drops over the inn like a woolen blanket, the walls are glowing amber with candlelight and firelight, and the buzz of the room has mellowed into a low, comforting murmur. It's not quiet, but it's the kind of not quiet that wraps itself around you gently, like bees humming in a distant hedge. There's no clock here, of course, no church bell to mark the hour, unless you're close enough to a monastery to hear the vesper chimes. But everyone feels it, the deepening of the dark, the slowing of steps, the stretch of limbs preparing for sleep. The hearth is roaring now, logs stacked high and cracking open with sharp little pops like medieval popcorn. People gather close, pulled not just by the heat but by the timeless pull of storytelling. Because in the Middle Ages, if you wanted entertainment after dark, you had 3 options: drink, sing, or talk, and if you were lucky, all 3 at once. Tonight's a talk night. The cloth merchant is in full performance mode again. This time, she's taken her seat on an upturned barrel and assumed the posture of someone with both authority and wine in her veins. She lifts a hand, demanding silence, not with words, but with that theatrical flair that says, "I am about to hold court, and you'd better hush unless you want your ale cursed." She starts with a tale of a knight, a real one, she claims, who duelled a ghost in a ruined chapel over the honor of a missing chicken. It's ridiculous, possibly blasphemous, and absolutely riveting. The goat listens, you listen. Even the cranky man in the corner leans forward. Storytelling was the Netflix of the Middle Ages, only your Wi-Fi was someone's memory and your buffer speed depended on whether they'd had enough ale to forget the ending. As she builds the tension, and then the chicken let out a scream, unlike any known to poultry or man, you notice someone else has joined the fire circle, a young boy probably no more than 10, tucked behind a man who must be his father, both holding bread in their laps and listening with wide eyes. And that's another thing about inns, age didn't matter as much as you'd think. Everyone was tired, everyone needed warmth, and no one turned down a good tale, even if it featured undead poultry and dubious swordsmanship. Historians still argue whether medieval inns had designated storytelling traditions or if it was purely improvised. But oral tradition ruled the age, and it wasn't unusual for one tale to stretch across 5 towns and change heroes twice by the time it returned to its origin. The cloth merchant's tale ends with the knight waking up surrounded by feathers, alone, and clutching a boiled egg. Proof, she insists, that not all quests end in battle. Applause follows, polite and sleepy, mixed with a few skeptical chuckles. Then someone else starts up, a thin man with a face like a shovel and fingers stained with ink, a scribe maybe. He begins a quieter tale, less dramatic, more eerie, a cursed mill wheel that spins backward every full moon and whispers the names of those lost in debt. The kind of story you don't laugh at, the kind you let settle in your bones a little. Your fingers are wrapped around a mug of ale now, still warm. It's bitter, earthy, with a vague note of something herbal, rosemary or regret. You sip it slowly, listening as stories rise and fall like waves. Some are clearly lies. Some might be half-truths, and one or two sound suspiciously autobiographical. A woman across from you, wearing what looks like two tunics layered for warmth and an expression that says she's slept in ditches worse than this, leans in and mutters, "You got a story?" You shrug. "Nothing with ghosts or chickens. That's a shame." She grins. "They're the best kind." She introduces herself as Berna, a weaver from the north. "Spun half the tapestries in Abbott's Hill. Not that the monks ever thanked me for making their saints look less cross-eyed." You smirk. "Why are you travelling?" Berna shrugs. "Work dried up. Guild politics." "A fire. Maybe a lover's quarrel. Depends on who you ask." She winks. "But let's say it's the fire. Sounds nobler." And so it goes. These bits of biography traded between strangers like coins, except lighter and less useful in a marketplace. The fire dims slightly. The innkeeper adds another log without ceremony. He doesn't ask anyone to quiet down. He doesn't need to. The mood is softening on its own, drifting gently towards sleep like a barge in a fog. Above, you hear the creak of floorboards. Someone's already gone up to their sleeping pallet, or at least the wooden plank and straw-filled sack that passes for one. Others follow slowly, a nod here, a muttered goodnight there, no big farewells. Just a gradual scattering of stories and limbs and yawns. Soon, only a few remain. You among them. The goat has curled up beside the hearth, nose tucked into her side, the world's most efficient foot warmer. The tanner is asleep at the table, chin in her hands. The ink-stained scribe snores quietly, one hand still resting on his quill like he's afraid someone will steal it. You glance at the fire, now burning low and red and full of dreams. There's something ancient about this moment, not just old, timeless. People gathering around fire, sharing tales, surrounded by the smells of smoke, sweat, food, and rain. You could be in any century. You could be anyone. And yet, here you are. Eventually, the innkeeper reappears and says softly, "Those still upright. Find your spot. Boards are clean enough." Blankets by the stairs. No argument, no ceremony. You follow the quiet procession to the upper level, really just a large loft where the boards are warped and the ceiling low. Everyone stakes out a place, tossing cloaks or bags or bundles of fabric to claim a corner. You do the same, your chosen blanket smelling faintly of hay and someone else's long journey. There's coughing. Shifting, one sneeze, someone farts but it's a sleepy one, more of a sigh, really. Then quiet, a few whispered words from two friars sharing a corner, probably a prayer or a gossip recap, then even that fades. The night wraps itself around the inn like a second roof. Outside, the wind sighs against the shutters. A storm might come later. Or not, doesn't matter, you're dry. You're full, you're not alone, and down by the hearth, Matilda the goat dreams of warm bread. Section 7. You wake slowly, not all at once, not like an alarm bell has rung or a rooster's screamed in your face, but like someone turned the sky up a notch and your body had no choice but to respond. The wooden floor beneath you is hard, predictably, but your borrowed blanket has trapped enough warmth to make it bearable. You stretch cautiously, listening to the chorus of early morning groans, sniffs, and joint cracks that echo softly around the loft like the inn's own sunrise song. Downstairs, the inn is already breathing again. Someone's stoking the fire, slow and deliberate, each clank of the poker against the hearthstone a kind of medieval snooze button. The smell of something warm, barley porridge, you'd bet your other sock, wafts up through the floorboards. It's mixed with wood smoke, the lingering funk of overnight humanity, and the faintest trace of Matilda's opinionated presence. You sit up, brushing straw from your sleeves. Around you, others do the same. The friars are already upright and praying, heads bowed, lips moving silently. The ink-stained scribe rolls over, groans and mutters something about parchment for pillows before pulling his cloak over his head. You descend the creaking stairs with the slow dignity of someone whose knees now regret every moment of yesterday. Downstairs, the main room looks different in the early light, emptier, quieter, touched by that soft, grey kind of morning that makes everything feel a bit unreal. The tables are still cluttered with empty mugs and crumpled breadcloths. A candle gutted in its own wax sometime in the night and now leans sadly to one side, like it gave up just before the finish line. The innkeeper is hunched over a cauldron near the hearth, mumbling to it like it's personally offended him. You catch the scent of leeks and oats. Yes, porridge, again. Always, forever, but you're not here for a fine dining experience. You're here for survival, for warmth, for that miraculous feeling when your hands wrap around a wooden bowl of steaming something and you can feel your fingers again. You grab a seat on a bench that still holds the faint warmth of someone's backside and wait your turn. There's no formal cue, just the innate medieval sense of who's hungriest and who's not likely to stab anyone over breakfast. Soon enough, you're holding your own bowl, a wooden spoon tucked inside like a reward. It's hot, gloopy, and tastes like, well, like something that won't kill you. A few generous dabs of honey from the friar's jar help tremendously. You nod a silent thanks to them across the room. One nods back and raises his spoon in solemn solidarity. As people eat, the day's new rhythm begins. It's not loud. Not yet, just quiet conversation, the clink of spoons against wood, the scrape of chairs, the soft thunk of boots being laced up or sighed into. A woman near the door is checking a wax tablet and muttering to herself about delivery dates and route times. She's a courier maybe, or pretending to be. In truth, there were entire social classes who spent half their lives in inns, walking the line between profession and perpetual guest. A man at the window unwraps a bundle of waxed cloth to reveal, of all things, a collection of playing cards, clearly homemade, the paint faded and edges soft. He lays them out and begins playing a solitary game you don't recognize. You're pretty sure the rules are made up. He looks like someone who doesn't lose on principle. In the corner, Berna is gently combing out a snarled hank of wool. Her hands move with practiced ease, tugging, separating, spinning slightly, twisting fiber into thread like she was born doing it. You find yourself watching the process, hypnotized. There's something deeply soothing about it, watching chaos pulled into order with nothing but fingers and patience. Historians still argue whether spinning was more of a domestic chore or a professional trade, but one thing's clear: fiber work in the medieval world never stopped. Even here, even now, while breakfast bowls are still warm, thread is being spun for cloaks, for banners, for bandages, for sails. The world quite literally hung on threads. You get up and wander toward the door, stretching your legs as you go. Outside, the morning is cool and damp, not raining yet, though the sky holds its usual vague threats. A few travelers are already saddling up. One argues gently with a stubborn mule. The mule, for what it's worth, wins the argument simply by sitting down. Nearby, a boy in a too large tunic chases a chicken that may or may not have escaped from someone's pouch last night. You make eye contact with the chicken. It looks haunted. You return inside, where the innkeeper is starting to shift the room from sleep mode to travel mode. Blankets are folded, tables wiped with rags that have definitely seen better centuries. A few stools are shuffled toward the wall to make space for passing packs and bundled wares. There's a routine here, an unspoken schedule. Medieval inns didn't operate like modern hotels with checkout times and printed bills. People left when they were ready, or when the food ran out, or when the goat started trying to eat their cloak. You help a man lift his pack onto his shoulders, a heavy thing, likely full of tools or unidentifiable iron objects. He grunts in thanks and tells you he's off to the next village over where someone owes him a pair of boots and a story. You wish him luck and watch as he ducks out the door, swallowed by the fog like he was never here at all. You find yourself wondering how many people pass through this place in a month, a year, a lifetime. How many stories are whispered here and forgotten? How many secrets are left behind in the corners and under the floorboards? The friars are gone now, their footsteps already fading down the muddy road. The card player is packing up, tucking his deck into a leather pouch with the care of someone guarding treasure. Berna finishes her wool and wraps it tight, slipping it into a bag that looks like it's held everything from apples to unpaid debts. And then there's you, still here, still warm. Still full of yesterday's stories and today's barley. But the road waits, and maybe it's time to move. The innkeeper catches your eye and gives you a brief nod, not goodbye, not thank you, just a nod, a gesture that says, "You were here." That's enough. You stand, adjust your cloak, and head for the door. Matilda watches you from her hearthside throne, blinking slowly. Outside, the air is cool and sharp, like biting into an apple that doesn't want to be eaten. The road ahead stretches out, damp and rutted, the kind of path that demands everything and offers only maybe in return. You take your first step and the inn disappears behind you with surprising ease, but you carry it with you. Every creaky stair, every barley bite, every ridiculous ghost chicken tail. Because inns weren't just buildings, they were chapters, and you've just finished one. Section 8. You don't get far. Maybe a mile, maybe two, before the sky follows through on its earlier threats. The clouds, those smudged charcoal smears that have hovered all morning, finally burst. Not with a dramatic thunderclap or a cinematic deluge, no. This is the Middle Ages, not a movie. The rain starts in that uniquely disappointing way, a slow, steady drizzle, cold as regret, soaking you with 1,000 little needles rather than a proper soaking splash. Your cloak helps for about 15 minutes. Then it just becomes a wet, heavy scarf that clings to your shoulders like a needy ex. You glance back once, instinctively, half hoping the inn might still be visible. It isn't. It's gone, swallowed by trees and terrain and the basic rules of medieval travel. When you leave a place, you leave it. No GPS. No mile markers, just mud, mist, and muscle memory. Your boots squelch as you trudge forward, and the road narrows into something more like a suggestion, muddy cart tracks edged by slippery grass and the occasional puddle big enough to qualify as a seasonal lake. You share the trail with a trio of pigs that have absolutely no intention of making room for you. You sidestep them respectfully. They snort with what you're sure is derision. By midday, assuming the grey sludge overhead can be trusted to mark time, you're soaked, tired, and thinking longingly of Matilda and her warm, snoring goat breath. You come to a crossroad, marked by a leaning wooden post that once had signs, now faded into illegibility by time and weather. Very helpful. But you're in luck. Shelter looms. Not another inn, those are still miles apart in this region, but a roadside alehouse, smaller. Rougher, probably smells like feet, but it's something. A one-story structure hunched beneath a sagging thatched roof, its doorway open to the road like a mouth hoping someone brings soup. You duck inside, and the first thing that hits you is the warmth. Not heat exactly, but warmth. The kind that comes from fire and bodies and the sheer miracle of not being outside. The second thing that hits you is the smell. Damp wool, wood smoke, spilled ale, and something fishy lurking beneath it all, like an old joke someone keeps retelling. The interior is simpler than the inn. No private rooms, no hearth big enough to roast a boar, just a squat fireplace with a pot hanging over it, bubbling suspiciously. There's a bench, a few stools, and a low counter where an unsmiling woman polishes a wooden cup like it personally offended her ancestors. You find a seat near the fire, wringing out your cloak discreetly, which is to say, you attempt to do it without splashing anyone and fail immediately. No one seems to mind. A man beside you mutters, "Better wet than dead." You nod, the universal medieval reply to nearly anything. The woman behind the counter approaches, eyeing you like she's trying to guess your net worth by the mud on your boots. She grunts something that might be, "Want food," or "What for?" but you nod anyway. Moments later, a wooden bowl of something approximating stew is dropped in front of you with the subtlety of a thunderclap. It smells edible. The chunks could be root vegetables or fish or old parsnip ghosts. Doesn't matter, it's hot and fills your stomach like it's paying rent. As you eat, the alehouse begins to fill. A trio of shepherds with dripping cloaks enter, laughing about a sheep that apparently mistook a puddle for a rival. A messenger with ink-stained fingers stomps in next, cursing the weather in French, Latin, and something that might be dog. One of the shepherds pulls out a flute, badly carved, off-key, and utterly joyful. He starts to play a clumsy tune that sets feet tapping and someone humming. This is what a medieval alehouse does. It pulls strangers together and wraps them in a sticky wool blanket of forced camaraderie. Historians still argue whether alehouses like this were regulated, informal, or just someone's front room with beer, but most agree they were essential pit stops in a world where travel was slow, wet, and full of livestock-related hazards. A merchant at the far end starts telling a story, something about a bridge troll and a haunted turnip. You think he's joking, but the serious nods around him suggest otherwise. Maybe the turnip was real. You lean back, spoon paused halfway to your mouth, and just listen. This, too, is part of the day in the life, not just the inn's warm embrace or the satisfying ache of reaching shelter at dusk. No, travel was the messy, muddy middle bit, the part where your socks are wet, your stomach's uncertain, and your only source of entertainment is a man who may or may not be drunk pretending to duel a ghost vegetable. And you'd be surprised how often that middle bit turned into the most memorable. Eventually, the stew is gone. You sip from a shared ale, lukewarm, slightly sour, with a kick like a mule and the subtle aftertaste of rain barrel. The fire crackles. The flute man's tune turns into a dirge before fizzling out completely. You could stay. It's tempting. But the rain has slowed to a manageable mist, and you've got a destination, even if it's vague, even if it's just the next village or someplace with dry socks. You leave a few coins on the table, nod a thanks to the stew witch behind the counter, and step out into the world again. The path glistens now, slick with rain and full of tiny rivulets. Your cloak is heavier than ever. Your boots squish ominously, but you've been fed and warmed and laughed at a haunted root vegetable. That counts for something. You walk, past the leaning sign, past the pigs who are still judging you, past a farmer who waves without stopping, and a boy riding a donkey who yells, "Duck." Then too late, you understand he meant the bird, not the command, and get smacked in the face with flapping feathers. You wipe your cheek, laugh under your breath, and keep walking, because the day isn't over. The journey continues, and somewhere up ahead, past the puddles, past the next town, and maybe two after that, another inn is waiting, with warm floors, with bad stew, and maybe, if you're lucky, a goat. Section 9. By now the road is less a path and more an endurance test. You're halfway between places, no town in sight, no real landmarks, unless you count a tree shaped vaguely like a man giving up. Your boots are a horror story, your cloak smells like despair stew, and you're pretty sure something crawled into your sock at the last stop. You don't check. You simply form an unspoken agreement with it. I won't bother you, you don't bite me, and then, just when you think you might have to lie down in a ditch and let the Middle Ages win, you see it, a sloped roof peeking through a grove of tilting trees. Smoke drifting lazily from a chimney, the soft clatter of hooves and the occasional honk of laughter. Another inn. This one's different from the last, bigger, for one. 2 stories, sturdier beams, a bit of flair in the woodwork. A faded sign dangles above the door, depicting something that might be a lion or a particularly angry sheep. It swings in the breeze like it's always been there and always will be. Inside, the scene is more bustling than cozy. You step into a warm wash of light and voices. This inn is livelier. Maybe it's the hour, maybe the region, maybe the ale's better. Either way, there's energy in the air. It hums. You're greeted not by the innkeeper, but by a boy of maybe 11, barefoot and alert, who glances you up and down and calls out, "Traveller," before vanishing into the back. You take that as a good sign. At least someone noticed you exist. You find an empty stool by the fire and let your pack hit the floor with a relieved thud. The heat of the hearth creeps up your legs, warms your face, and begins the slow, glorious process of returning you to a human temperature. Around you, the evening crowd settles in. This place, unlike the quieter inn you left that morning, is a hub, a small ecosystem. You begin to observe. At the far table, 2 traders argue over something rolled out on the wood between them. Maps, maybe, or contracts, or the last known location of a particularly valuable goose. One jabs a finger, the other rolls his eyes dramatically. You half expect them to slap each other with gloves. At another table, a group of labourers finish off bowls of what smells suspiciously like meat stew, a sign that this inn, while still heavily porridge-based, may occasionally branch out. One of the men burps so thunderously that a nearby dog lifts its head in concern. Behind you, near the entrance, a woman sharpens a blade with the confidence of someone who absolutely will not be interrupted. The blade is small, the kind used for eating or emergency moral adjustments. Her cloak is trimmed with rabbit fur and road dust, and her boots are clearly made for travel, not fashion. A mercenary maybe, or a caravan guard, either way she's no one to cross. And then there's the hearth crowd, always a few of them, not guests exactly. Not staff, just fixtures, an old man with a pipe that never stays lit. A blind dog that navigates the room with unsettling accuracy. A woman with more rings than fingers and a story for everyone, though she tells them only if asked, and never the same way twice. You order food. This time, bread, cheese, and, miracle of miracles, a bit of cold meat. Chicken, you think, possibly rabbit. Either way, it's food that once had opinions, and it's not porridge, so you don't ask questions. A cup of ale follows, smoother than what you had in the last place, with fewer floating bits and the faintest aftertaste of apples. You sip slowly, savouring every drop like it's a reward for surviving the road, and in a way, it is. Historians still argue whether inns made most of their profit from food, drink, or lodging, but one thing is clear: it was never the comfort that kept people coming back. It was the network, the community, the promise that somewhere out there someone else had survived the same mud, the same weather, the same chicken incident, and here now you could laugh about it over ale. Speaking of which, laughter erupts from a nearby table. A bard, or someone trying very hard to be one, is holding court. He strums a battered lute, clearly missing a string or two, and belts out a song about a knight who fell in love with a very large turnip. It's either a metaphor or the product of several ales, too many. You chuckle despite yourself. It's contagious. These little moments, bad songs, overcooked stew, accidental elbow jabs from strangers, they form the tapestry of life on the road. It's not clean or grand or poetic. It's messy and loud and smells vaguely like onions, but it's real. And it's here, in this noise, that you feel it again. That odd sense of connection. Like you've stepped not into a building, but into a moment. One that thousands before you have experienced. A warm room, a hot meal, and a roof overhead. All, somehow, miraculous. A tap on your shoulder. It's the barefoot boy back again, offering a room for the night. You nod and follow him up creaky stairs that sound like they're filing a complaint with every step. The room is small, just a bed, a stool, and a tiny shuttered window, but it's dry. The mattress is stuffed with straw that only pokes you when provoked. You sit down, peel off your boots with a wince, and sigh. You stay there for a moment, just breathing, listening to the muffled life continuing below. From this upper floor, the inn feels different, less chaotic, more tender. Like you're listening to a town dream. You settle in, stretch your legs, and let your head fall back onto the bundled cloth pillow. You can still hear snatches of conversation rising through the floorboards. Someone is recounting the time they outran a tax collector. Someone else is trying to remember the name of a saint who protects travellers. Was it Julian? Christopher? One swears it's Saint Egbertha. You don't have the heart to correct them, or the certainty. You drift, half awake, imagining all the travellers who've slept in this bed before you. Merchants, messengers, runaways, romantics, people who stopped, just like you, in the middle of nowhere on their way to somewhere. Inns, after all, were never just buildings, they were pauses, and you, dear traveller, are mid-pause. For now, Section 10, morning comes in pieces. First, the far-off crow of a rooster, so faint you're not sure it isn't part of a dream. Then the creak of someone walking down the hall, boots tapping rhythmically against the warped wooden boards, and finally, the smell of bread, warm, real, maddeningly close. It seeps through the gaps in your shutters, luring you gently but firmly into the waking world. You open your eyes. The room is dim, only a faint grey light leaking in around the edges of the window. You stretch, and your joints respond like they've aged 30 years overnight. Typical medieval bedding, deceptively restful, but ultimately straw-stuffed treachery. Still you slept. You're warm, you're alive, a solid medieval score. Downstairs the inn is already alive with the soft chaos of early morning, people murmuring, boots scraping, bowls clinking. The fire has been restoked, casting its sleepy orange glow across the floor. You make your way down, your stomach leading the charge. The boy from last night appears again, this time clutching a basket of bread and looking far less amused by life. Porridge or bread, he grumbles. You nod toward the bread, and he dumps a generous hunk into your hands without ceremony. It's still warm, still steaming. A little piece of heaven in a world of damp socks. You sit near the hearth, nibbling slowly. The bread is dense but fresh, coarse but filling. And there's butter, real butter, pale and soft and faintly tangy. You smear it on and sigh without meaning to. It's the kind of breakfast that resets your faith in humanity, or at least in cows. Others eat quietly around you. The mercenary woman from last night is already polishing her gear. The map arguers appear to have called a temporary truce in the face of carbohydrates. The bard is curled in a corner, snoring softly into his lute. You decide not to check if he's drooling on the strings. Across the room, the innkeeper is overseeing it all. A different one from the last inn, of course, but cast from the same mould, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, radiating a tired authority that suggests he's seen every possible version of you at least twice. He manages to smile at some, scowl at others, and somehow knows exactly when to do both. This is his world. And it's a strange one, because for all that an inn appears to be a place of comfort, of respite, it's also a place of tension, of strangers passing through, of coins changing hands and secrets changing lips. Inns were the social crossroads of the medieval world, where gossip travelled faster than horses and reputations could be made or ruined over a single bowl of stew. Historians still argue whether innkeepers were more like hoteliers, landlords, or low-key informants. The truth, probably a bit of all three. They weren't just pouring drinks and sweeping floors. They were managing personalities, smoothing over feuds, and occasionally making sure that one traveller didn't accidentally, or deliberately, stab another. Today's innkeeper, for example, is currently diffusing a standoff over eggs. You watch, fascinated, as two men argue whether a particular egg was purchased or merely looked at with intent. The innkeeper steps in, raises one eyebrow, and both men immediately back down. The egg mysteriously returns to the kitchen, crisis averted, but not all crises are that small. You hear murmurs from another table, serious ones, words like bandits, tax levy, last harvest, darker tones, furtive glances. This isn't unusual. Inns aren't just places of rest, they're pressure valves, the kinds of places where things bubble up, slip out, or get quietly handled in the shadows, and yet there's levity too. A child runs through the main room chasing a cat, shrieking with laughter. The cat looks profoundly unimpressed, as all inn cats do. Someone sneezes so violently they spill their ale and the entire room chuckles. These tiny eruptions of joy, of absurdity, they balance the gloom, keep the place human. You finish your bread and rise to stretch. There's no fixed schedule. You're a traveller in the Middle Ages and the only itinerary is before sunset and before I collapse. Still, you linger a bit longer, watching, absorbing. Inns, you realise, have their own gravity. They draw people in, not just for food and shelter, but for company, for the news, for the sense of being, even briefly, in the middle of something rather than on the edge of everything. There's a board by the door where messages are scrawled, not parchment, mind you, wood roughly carved, initials, symbols, codes. Notices of missing goats, overdue debts, and a cryptic drawing of what might be a dragon or a very large chicken. You don't ask. Near it, a monk posts a small piece of parchment, an invitation to a nearby shrine. He pins it with care, smoothing it with his sleeve. He nods at you politely, then vanishes into the morning light with the quiet efficiency of someone used to being ignored. And just like that, you feel the tug again. The call of the road. Your pack is where you left it, and while your boots are only marginally drier than yesterday, your spirit feels lighter. The innkeeper gives you a curt nod as you leave. No fanfare, no goodbyes. You are one of hundreds who've come and gone. Outside, the air is crisp, damp with dew and alive with birdsong. A cart creaks past, pulled by a mule with an attitude problem. A woman heads into the woods with a basket and a dagger, whistling a tune you don't recognize. You take the road east, because east feels lucky today. Behind you, the inn settles back into its rhythm. Ahead, the day stretches out like a promise and a dare. And somewhere between the two, you begin to notice things again. The feel of your boots on the path, the shift of your pack on your shoulders. The way your breath fogs slightly in the cool morning air. You pass a hedgerow and startle a family of hedgehogs. You stop to admire a flower pushing stubbornly through a pile of last year's leaves. You even hum a bit, nothing fancy, maybe that ridiculous turnip song from last night. Maybe your own tune, the rhythm of the road with a beat set by your steps and the occasional low-flying bird. There's beauty in it. Raw, uneven, accidental beauty. It isn't grand, it isn't clean. But it's yours, and the next inn, the next stew, the next roaring fire, they're waiting, but not too fast. Today, you wander, because sometimes the best part of the journey is the walk itself. Section 11. The road turns. You wouldn't call it dramatic, more like a gentle nudge left, past a tree that looks like it's tired of pretending to be a tree. It leans forward slightly, like it wants to sit down and take a break from centuries of being a landmark. You follow the curve, humming, boots crunching over gravel and the occasional unidentifiable splatter. There's a rhythm to it all now, a strange, quiet dance between you and the road. Step, breathe, squint at the sun. Repeat. Ahead something shifts. At first it's just a suggestion, a change in the light maybe, or the way the wind smells. Then you see them, carts, dozens of them, lined along the road, parked haphazardly, guarded by people who look both bored and ready to swing something heavy if provoked. And then you hear it, the low murmur of voices, the occasional shout, a burst of laughter, the distant twang of a stringed instrument. You've stumbled upon a market, not a town market, mind you. This isn't your classic cobbled square with wicker baskets affair. This is a travelling market, the kind that sets up wherever the road allows and the locals aren't too hostile. It smells of leather, onions, goat smoke, wet wool and excitement. Mostly onions. You step through the throng, dodging a boy swinging a bucket and a woman with 12 chickens tethered by string. The stalls are rough built, some just cloth canopies held up by sticks, but they're bustling. Here you can buy almost anything, and by anything we mean used boots, smoked eels, homemade ink, a suspiciously enthusiastic ferret, jars of medicinal jam, 3 kinds of cheese, one of them yelling distance away, love charms made of bone, iron nails, dyed cloth and knives, so many knives. One stall boasts a selection of candles that smell like different saints, another claims to sell relics, but you're pretty sure St. Lawrence didn't have 5 thumbs. You nod politely and move along. There's a healer too. Not a doctor, of course, this is the Middle Ages. She's more a hedge witch meets apothecary meets chronic liability. Her table is strewn with herbs, dried frogs, feathers, small bones, and a jar labelled for curses. You don't ask. She tries to sell you something called wolf's breath, which she claims will protect you from nightmares, tooth rot, and betrayal by close friends. You buy a sachet out of sheer curiosity. Historians still argue whether medieval markets like this were legal, semi-legal, or just tolerated until someone complained to the local lord. What's clear is that they served a vital purpose, not just for commerce, but for contact. People met here, traded gossip along with grain, settled grudges, eyed potential spouses, maybe even picked a pocket or two. Accidentally, of course. You stop to listen to a storyteller. He stands on a barrel, arms flailing, eyes wide. His voice rises and falls like waves, weaving a tale about a knight who challenged death to a drinking contest and won, only to wake up married to a banshee. The crowd laughs, gasps, tosses coins. He bows, sweat dripping, and starts again. A different tale, same charm. Somewhere nearby, a woman sings in a language you don't know. Her voice is clear, almost sharp, cutting through the market noise like a thread through cloth. People pause to listen. Some smile, some don't. Music in medieval life was part background, part magic. It stitched memory to place. You pause at a cloth merchant's stall, mostly to admire the sheer chaos of colour. Bolts of wool in mad hues are stacked like haphazard rainbows. The merchant, a man with more rings than teeth, tells you he dyes them himself using techniques from a sacred lake where the fish whisper secrets. You buy a strip of crimson cloth, mostly for the story. Nearby, 2 women argue over the merits of garlic as both food and curse prevention. You learn that rubbing garlic on your window can keep out spirits, rats, and, surprisingly, tax collectors. One of the women is holding a tax ledger. You choose not to get involved. You spot a scribe offering to write letters for passers-by. He sits under a makeshift tent, quill poised, parchment spread out, ready to turn love, loss, or very strongly worded requests for land restitution into something poetic. A young man dictates a message to his sweetheart, cheeks pink, voice trembling. The scribe nods solemnly, translating stammered affection into practiced elegance. The market hums, people eat while walking, barter loudly, sneak glances at each other when they think no one's looking. A game of dice begins behind a cart, and the tension builds like a coiled spring. Coins clink, curses fly, someone accuses someone else of cheating, a dagger appears, then disappears. Then there's laughter. You have no idea who won. You find a food stall. The woman behind it serves flat cakes fried in fat, sprinkled with salt, and wrapped in cloth to go. You take one and bite in. It's delicious, greasy, hot, aggressively filling. You buy another. A man next to you offers a flask. You decline. He shrugs and downs it himself, then proceeds to tell you the history of every blister on his feet, including the one shaped like Normandy. He might be lying. Eventually, your pockets lighter and your mind slightly fogged by herb-scented candles, you wander past the market's edge. Behind the stalls, a patch of grass is dotted with travellers resting, chatting, repairing things. A woman sews a new strap onto her sandal while lecturing her son about saintly patience. A group of friars play a game involving pebbles and increasingly aggressive prayer. One merchant has collapsed under his own cart, snoring peacefully, his feet sticking out like some sort of religiously ambiguous witch. Markets like this weren't just economy, they were theatre. They allowed people to perform, to show off, to pretend. For a few hours you could be wealthier, wiser, more mysterious than you really were. You could claim your remedy for fleas was handed down by monks on a mountain, and who would challenge you? You sit for a moment on the grass, watching the market pulse like a living creature, sighing, shifting, smiling. It will be gone by dusk, packed into carts, rolled down roads, scattered to the wind until next week, next town. You stretch your legs, brush crumbs from your tunic, and stand. It's time to move on. The road is still there, waiting. You glance back only once. The storyteller is still talking. The ferret has escaped. The healer is arguing with a cheese merchant about the ethical use of bat wings. And somewhere in the crowd, someone new is just arriving, blinking, tired, about to buy their first candle that smells like St. Catherine. You smile and turn away. The road curves again, and so do you. ChatGPT deny. Section 12T, the road leads onward, and your feet obey, more from habit than intention now. After the clamour and colour of the roadside market, everything feels too quiet. You hear the wind again, whispering through the trees like it's catching you up on everything you missed. Leaves rustle like distant applause. A bird shrieks overhead with all the drama of a street performer who just lost his only prop. You're deep in the countryside now. Rolling fields, scattered woods, low stone walls that wobble like they were built by tipsy monks, and maybe they were. This isn't empty land, though. It's lived in, worked over, argued about. Every clump of hedgerow has probably been cursed at least 3 generations of farmers. You pass a shepherd with a face so weathered it could probably be used to date sediment layers. He nods without smiling, more out of duty than recognition. His sheep don't acknowledge you at all. Sheep rarely do. And then, around a bend, you spot it. Not a castle, not a village, a manor. It squats there like a very proud, very old toad. Stone walls, modest towers, a few colourful banners fluttering in the breeze. It's not massive, but it's clearly important. You can tell by the gate, wood, reinforced with iron, flanked by guards who look bored in that please try something sort of way. You weren't planning to visit a lord today, but here you are. And honestly, it might be interesting. Manor life is a whole different rhythm. Unlike inns or markets, manors don't travel or transform. They anchor everything around them: land, labour, gossip, and often several feuds that no one remembers the start of. The manor is a medieval power station, humming with rules, wealth, and seasonal turnip drama. A steward intercepts you at the gate, suspicious but not hostile. You explain, vaguely, that you're a traveller seeking a dry place to sit and maybe a crust of bread. He gives you a long look, then lets you in with a shrug that says, "Fine, but if anything's stolen, I'm blaming you." Inside the manor courtyard, everything smells of hay, horses, and responsibility. A boy with an apron too large for his body is chasing geese away from a cart full of cabbages. A smith hammers at something metal and mysterious. A dog bounds past carrying a boot it almost certainly wasn't meant to have. Then you spot them, the lord and lady, not on thrones, not behind walls, but seated under a striped canopy on rough benches, eating something involving meat, bread, and the resigned expressions of people who've been at this social hosting thing far too long. You nod a greeting. The lady raises a brow. The lord chews. Eventually a servant brings you to the edge of the gathering. You sit, quiet, observing. The manor is buzzing. Pages run back and forth carrying messages that no one seems to read. A priest argues with a beekeeper. A noblewoman inspects fabrics with the intense scrutiny of someone judging both quality and moral fibre. This is life at the manor, structured chaos. Historians still argue whether medieval lords were more administrative managers or symbolic figureheads. Here, you see a bit of both. The lord mediates a land dispute between 2 tenants with all the enthusiasm of a man explaining chess rules to a goose. The lady, meanwhile, oversees a rota of chores, festival plans, and the current plague gossip network. It's easy to romanticize manor life, stone halls, blazing hearths, feasting, but the truth, most days were full of paperwork, small fires, literal and social, and livestock with poor timing. The average medieval noble spent more time solving pig boundary issues than jousting. There is, of course, some luxury. The food is better than most places you've eaten. Not because it's extravagant, just more variety. Roasted root vegetables, spiced wine, bread with actual flour in it. Someone passes you a dish that might be pheasant or might be an aggressively prepared chicken. You eat it anyway. A bard sings a slow, lilting tune about a knight who fell in love with a fishwife. The chorus involves a bucket, a misunderstanding, and a very wet wedding. The lord laughs once, then stops, remembering dignity. You notice servants moving almost invisibly, refilling goblets, clearing platters, dodging glares. Their work is smooth, practiced. No one thanks them. One of them, maybe 17, maybe ageless in that medieval way, glances at you and smirks. You look like you've seen too many parsnips, she says quietly, handing you a napkin. You smile, she vanishes. Eventually you're invited, gently, indirectly, to help in the garden. It's not punishment, it's just how things work. A place to stay means a place to contribute. You don't argue. The garden behind the manor is organized. Rows of herbs, leafy greens, strange things with names that sound like spells. You help pick thyme while an old man hums to the plants. He claims it helps them grow. He also claims he once met a fox that could recite psalms. You nod supportively. By sunset, your hands are stained green and your back is in open rebellion, but the air is sweet, the sky a watercolor of oranges and purples, and someone is baking something nearby. You sit on a low wall, sore but content. The manor isn't home, but for a moment it feels close. A messenger rides in just as the gates begin to close, mud-caked and wild-eyed. He speaks quickly, hands over a sealed letter, and disappears again like a nervous squirrel. Whatever it is, it shifts the mood. You sense tension crackling behind the stone walls now. You're offered a space in the stables for the night, not the guest hall, not the servants' loft, somewhere in between. Which is exactly where you are, isn't it? You don't mind. You curl up on hay that smells like damp wood and old leather. You listen to the manor fall asleep in stages. First the barking stops, then the banging, then the soft footsteps, and finally, silence. The stars outside blink, unbothered by intrigue or vegetables, and you, somewhere between traveller and witness, drift off beside a mule who snores exactly like the Lord does. Section 13. The mule's snoring fades with the morning light. You blink yourself awake, face slightly damp from hay dew, spine offering a quiet protest with each movement. The stable is warmer than you expected, though it still smells intensely of horse and ambition. The mule, your nighttime roommate, is already awake and judging you, or perhaps just chewing something from 200 years ago. You stretch, brush off some straw, and step out into the courtyard. The manor is already in motion. Roosters scream like they're trying to win an argument. Chickens scatter in outrage as servants hustle between outbuildings. Smoke snakes upward from the kitchen chimney. The world has resumed its business without your permission. You thank the steward and are offered a heel of bread and a boiled egg to go. Not exactly a send-off feast, but no one's trying to keep you here, and that counts as hospitality. Back on the road again. This time the path narrows. It winds deeper into the woods, where trees cluster like gossiping villagers whispering over your head. The canopy thickens. Light filters in like someone spilled golden ale through a sieve. Birdsong echoes faintly, accompanied by the occasional squirrel-related commotion. And then the world softens even further. The path turns mossy. The sound of trickling water appears like a thought. You're nearing a forest hermitage, not quite a monastery. Not quite a hut in the woods, something in between, a place for retreat, prayer, healing, or hiding, depending on who you ask. Hermits in the Middle Ages weren't necessarily antisocial. Some of them took in visitors, offered simple remedies, or just listened to people who needed to unload their spiritual baggage. Others were more enthusiastic about solitude, living in caves, surviving on roots, and discussing theology with squirrels. Historians still argue whether most hermits were truly devout or simply escaping the crushing weight of feudal taxes and communal expectations. Either way, the hermitage you approach now seems welcoming, at least in a don't spook the birds kind of way. You see it before you hear it, a small stone structure tucked between trees, half covered in ivy. A lean tosht clings to the side with bundles of drying herbs hanging like upside-down flags. Smoke curls lazily from a hole in the roof, and then he appears. The hermit, bearded, robed, barefoot, and carrying a large spoon like it's a walking stick. He eyes you. You nod, he nods, no words needed. Just two travellers meeting in the middle of some vague spiritual crosswalk. He motions for you to sit by a flat rock. You obey. He stirs a pot over a fire that looks more ambition than heat. Whatever's in it smells like regret and garlic. You smile politely and pretend you don't hear it bubbling in protest. He hands you a wooden bowl. You accept. It's thick, lumpy, and suspiciously green. You sip. It's not bad. Tastes like boiled weeds with a touch of insight. As you eat, he hums, a slow, steady tune that somehow harmonizes with the wind. Birds flutter nearby, but never land. A fox passes through the clearing, glances at you both, then continues its fox business without comment. There's peace here. You're not sure if it's holy peace or just the kind that comes from nobody expecting anything of you. Either way, you breathe slower. Eventually, the hermit speaks. Don't trust monks with clean fingernails, he says, then returns to stirring. You nod solemnly, adding this to your growing collection of questionable medieval wisdom. Right next to don't buy candles from a man missing eyebrows and always check the cheese for movement. Over the next hour, you learn that this hermit was once a baker, then a pilgrim, then briefly married, and now just is. He shows you a scroll he's copied, though it's mostly drawings of animals with unnervingly human expressions. You compliment the craftsmanship. He tells you about a dream where St. Anthony rode a goat into a thunderstorm and scolded the clouds. You believe him, or at least you pretend to. It's the kind of place where disbelief feels rude. Before you leave, he offers you a blessing. It's short in Latin and mostly mumbled. But the look in his eyes is warm, serious, unflinching. He places a hand on your head like he's balancing the sky there, and then, with no ceremony at all, he turns back to his spoon. You rise, thank him, step back onto the mossy path. The forest seems quieter now, as if it knows something sacred happened and is trying to be polite about it. You walk for a while in silence. Sunlight returns in strips. The trees thin. Birds return to arguing. The road resumes its more usual medieval character. A little mud, a few ruts, the occasional alarming footprint. And then you smell smoke. Not the gentle hermit soup sort. This is stronger. Thicker, sharp with something metallic and burnt. You quicken your pace. A clearing opens, and there it is, a forge, the blacksmith's domain. It's not a grand place, more of a lean-to with ambition, but the fire is fierce, the anvil gleams. The blacksmith herself is already at work, hammer in hand, face lit orange by the coals. You watch, entranced, as she draws a glowing blade from the fire and strikes it, over and over, each clang echoing like a war drum. Sparks fly like angry stars. Her movements are precise, practiced, powerful. Smiths in the Middle Ages were respected, essential, and slightly feared. They worked with fire and mystery, turning ore into tools, weapons, horseshoes, and occasionally jewelry for someone richer than you'll ever be. You greet her between blows. She grunts, then gestures to the water barrel. You take a drink, grateful. She doesn't talk much. You learn her name is Marga, that she was apprenticed at 13, and that she once accidentally forged a sword meant for a bishop and gave it to a butcher instead. He used it well, she says, hammering rhythmically. She offers to fix your boot, which is kind because it has started to split like it's auditioning to become two boots. You sit while she works, marveling at the mix of grace and muscle in her hands. As she mends, she speaks slowly, thoughtfully. People think the fire is the danger. It's not. It's the forgetting. If you forget where your hand is, where the metal's bending, what you meant to do, that's when it breaks. She's not just talking about boots anymore. You leave with a mended shoe, a deeper appreciation for hammers, and a faint headache from the sheer volume of ringing metal. The road calls again. This time, with a little more weight behind your steps, you're carrying something new now, not just bread and soup and saint-scented candles, but fragments of stories passed along by those who stayed behind so you could keep moving. Section 14. The clang of the forge echoes behind you like a fading heartbeat, fading with each step until only the birds and your thoughts remain. You're back in motion, boots clicking softly against packed earth, mended just enough to delay disaster. The trees thin further, the land opens up, and you start seeing the bones of something grand. A town wall in the distance, low, worn, half fallen in places, but still trying. You're approaching a medieval town, not a capital, not a city of spires. Just a town, medium-sized, comfortably chaotic, and teetering somewhere between progress and potholes. Smoke drifts lazily from a cluster of chimneys, rooftops pressed together like gossiping neighbours. The main gate creaks open as a cart of turnips rolls out, steered by a boy whose entire personality seems to be barely awake. You enter unnoticed. No trumpet fanfare, no suspicious glances. You're just one more face in the stream, and oh, what a stream! This place pulses with life. Cobblestone alleys packed shoulder to shoulder with tradesmen, apprentices, shopkeepers, and an impressive number of cats. It smells of cheese, leather, sweat, and opportunity. Laughter rings out from behind painted shutters. Someone yells about eel pies. Somewhere, a lute is losing a battle with its own strings. The medieval town is a strange hybrid. A place of rules and risk. Charter laws govern who can sell what, when, and how, unless you bribe the right official, in which case, well, carry on. Streets are assigned to trades. Fishmongers in one corner, blacksmiths in another, tanners exiled downwind for good reason. You pass under a hanging sign shaped like a pig holding a shoe. The cobbler, clearly, has a sense of humour. Next door, a cooper wrestles with an uncooperative barrel. Further along, a woman with arms like tree trunks stirs a vat of dye that smells vaguely like boiled hope and regret. Each person here is part of a living network. Guilds organize labor, defend standards, and occasionally throw suspiciously expensive banquets. Membership means survival. Without it, you're just a drifter hoping someone drops a hammer on their toe and needs you as a backup. Historians still argue whether these towns were genuinely democratic within their walls or merely replicated feudal power in a fancier wrapper. But right now you can feel the energy of self-made people, the churn of ambition under the soot. Someone grabs your arm. "Try my sausages," says a woman with eyes like judgment and a tray like a battlefield. You try one. It's assertive, possibly squirrel. You thank her and move on, faster now. The town square opens like a sigh. There's a well in the centre, surrounded by people filling buckets, arguing, and occasionally dropping things with a splash. A juggler performs to mild applause. A dog steals a meat pie and begins the chase of his life. A child offers you a rock shaped like a potato for luck. You accept. It's warm. You make your way toward the church. Every medieval town has one. Tall, solemn, built of stone and sermons, this one looms at the far end of the square, its spire crooked like it's reaching for God and missing slightly. Inside, it's dim and cool. Candles flicker against worn walls, dust dances in the shafts of light from high windows. You slide into a pew, not for prayer exactly, but to rest. A monk shuffles past, humming. A woman kneels nearby, whispering her fears into the silence. Churches in medieval towns weren't just for worship. They were shelters, meeting halls, gossip hubs, and sometimes places to store grain or escape a tax collector. Sacred and practical all at once, you stay long enough for your feet to stop throbbing and your thoughts to soften at the edges. When you leave, the bell rings once, as if to say, try not to cause any trouble. Outside, the market has grown louder. You weave through it like a thread through cloth. Past spice stalls that sting your nose, weavers who argue over indigo dye, and a suspiciously confident man selling genuine relics that all appear to be old spoons. You pause at a booth selling writing tools, quills, inkwells, parchment. The vendor explains his work like it's art, which, in a world mostly illiterate, it kind of is. He lets you try a goose quill. You write your name. It looks like a sneeze. He pats your hand kindly and suggests practice. You notice a gathering ahead. A crowd encircles a platform where a town crier reads aloud, voice booming like he's performing for the rafters. News from the king, news from Rome. News about a sheep that gave birth to a pig, likely a transcription error. People murmur, nod, roll their eyes. In a time without social media, this is the feed. You press on through the crowd and duck into a tavern before someone tries to recruit you for something. Inside, wood, warmth, ale and conversation. It's the heart of town life, traders swapping stories. A clerk crying into his cider. A woman laughing so hard she nearly drops her meat pie. You order something safe-looking, stew and bread, and listen. At the next table, two men argue about bridge tolls. One insists they're unfair, the other insists he deserves them because his cousin owns the bridge. Behind you, a poet recites something absolutely filthy but with exquisite rhythm. It's here you get a better sense of the town's soul, not in the towers or scrolls or even the markets, but in the daily drama of real, imperfect people trying to stay fed, warm, and one step ahead of disaster. You finish your meal. The sun has shifted, stretching the shadows longer. You step back into the street, stomach full, satchel heavier with an accidental purchase, a small wooden charm carved like a goose, bought from a child who claimed it would protect you from ghosts and cabbage. You nod thanks and keep walking. Just outside the town gate, you glance back. From this distance, the town looks peaceful, like a painting. But you know better now. Inside those walls is a loud, smelly, beautiful engine of medieval survival, built not just of stone and timber, but of stories, superstitions, awkward bartering, and really weird sausages. The wind picks up, evening leans in, time to keep moving. Section 15. The road out of town greets you with a sharp breeze and the unmistakable scent of manure, which feels oddly comforting now, a familiar signature of the countryside. The town fades behind you, its rooftops shrinking into the horizon like a dream you're slowly waking from, but you're not heading back to solitude just yet. Your next destination waits in the not-too-far distance, a fair. Yes, a proper medieval fair, loud and messy and wildly out of proportion. These events weren't the tidy, themed weekend diversions we picture today. No turkey legs on sticks or jousting for Instagram. A real medieval fair was a tangled knot of commerce, chaos, and whatever passed for entertainment before people discovered sarcasm on the internet. Your path soon joins a wider road where others walk alongside you, some in wagons, some leading animals, some already drunk. There's a woman pulling a cart full of dyed wool, and two children chasing each other with sticks shaped like dragons. A man with a lute sings a ballad about a baker and a chicken. It has too many verses and not enough plot. You crest a small hill and there it is, the fair, colour everywhere. Banners flapping like they're trying to escape the poles, makeshift tents clustered like mushrooms after a rain. The smell hits next. Spiced meat, roasted nuts, unwashed bodies, ale, and whatever's fermenting in that mystery bucket behind the food stalls. The sound, it's a tidal wave. Music, haggling, laughter, and the occasional distant thud of someone falling off something. You step in. At once you're pulled into the undertow. A juggler flings flaming torches through the air. A dancing bear, yes, an actual bear in a jester's collar, trudges in circles while a toothless man plays a pipe with more spit than melody. A group of nuns sell candied figs next to a booth advertising love potions brewed from virginal dew and authentic monk beard clippings. You decline. Fairs like this were vital in the medieval world. Many towns and villages were too small or scattered to support permanent marketplaces, so annual or seasonal fairs became the lifeblood of trade. People travelled for days, even weeks, to buy and sell goods they couldn't find at home. Glass from Venice, spices from the Levant, wool from Flanders. Historians still argue whether these fairs truly democratized commerce or simply created new monopolies under fancier coats of arms. But today, you see everything from silk to soil-stained turnips being exchanged with the same level of drama. You pass a merchant hawking mirrors, small, polished bits of metal. So shiny you'll fall in love with yourself, he crows, offering one to a woman with the confidence of 3 queens. She squints, snorts, and moves on. Nearby, a surgeon demonstrates his wares, knives, scalpels, and a terrifying thing he calls a tooth key. You keep walking. A puppet show is in full swing. 2 wooden knights argue with a dragon who speaks in rhymes. The children scream with joy. One child tries to throw a chicken leg at the dragon and is swiftly relocated by a nun with battlefield reflexes. A man tries to sell you a mystic map that promises to reveal buried treasure. It's drawn in what appears to be jam. You admire the effort and donate a coin for performance value. Past the entertainers and trinket sellers, you find the serious stalls. Cloth merchants unfolding bolts of linen and wool, toolmakers explaining the benefits of their iron nails versus the cheaper ones those frauds down the lane sell. Bakers displaying elaborate loaves that look too perfect to eat, though a rat is trying. And the food, oh the food. Not elegant, not healthy, but mesmerizing. You try a meat pie that could double as a blunt weapon, a tart so sour it realigns your jaw, a honeyed oat cake that sticks to your teeth like betrayal. Every flavor is intense, every bite slightly dangerous. In the center of it all is a platform, the main attraction. Today, it's a storytelling competition. Bards, minstrels, and enthusiastic amateurs take turns weaving tales of chivalry, ghosts, and the time their uncle swore he saw a flying pig near York. You settle into the crowd, half-eaten oatcake in hand. One performer stands out. A tall woman in a fox fur cloak, voice smooth as ale, spinning a tale about a prince cursed to speak only in riddles. Her rhythm pulls you in. Her pauses are perfectly timed. When she finishes, the crowd exhales together, like they'd been holding their breath for the whole tale. You clap, smiling. There's something ancient about this moment. Oral storytelling, the root of all the history you've walked through today. Long before books, before ink and quills and questionable parchment contracts, people shared their lives through story, here in dirt-floored rings, under fading banners with mouths full of mystery meat. You wander again, drawn by the sound of music. 2 lutes, a drum, and something that may once have been a goat bell form the fair's unofficial band. Couples dance in the dust. A boy with painted cheeks tries to impress a girl with an awkward spin. She laughs. He nearly falls. Romance alive and clumsy. You spot a stall offering charms, wooden, metal, stone. You pick up one shaped like an acorn. The old woman behind the stall says it brings slow wisdom and mild digestion. You don't believe her, but you like the acorn, so you buy it. Before you know it, dusk begins to blur the fair's edges. Torches are lit. Music slows. The bear is napping under a table. A child cries because he dropped his sugar plum in the mud and then tried to eat it anyway. The air cools. You find a quiet spot on the edge of the fair, by a fence near the stables, away from the buzz. You sit. The noise continues behind you, but softer now, like waves lapping at a distant shore. You pull your cloak around your shoulders. In your satchel, a charm, a rock shaped like a potato, a lumpy oatcake, and about 12 different stories, some of them yours now, forever. The fair will go on late into the night. You won't. You lean back against the fence, watching sparks float up from the fire pits, drifting like wishes no one ever wrote down. Sleep pulls at the corners of your eyes. Just a little longer here. Just a little more time among the living relics of laughter, trade, and puppet dragons. Section 16, you wake to dew, cold and delicate like the morning has politely pressed a fingertip to your cheek. The fair behind you is quieter now, slumped over from the revelry of last night. A few early risers shuffle past with sleepy eyes and leftover pastries. The bear, remarkably, is still asleep, head resting on a cabbage like it's a silk pillow. You rise, joints complaining. Time to move on. Today your road leads not to another town, or fair, or farm, but to the unseen heart of the medieval world. You're going monastic, that's right. Cloisters, chants, and more silence than your overthinking brain is used to. You make your way down a winding lane lined with oak and beech where birds greet the rising sun with chirps both cheerful and deeply judgmental. A brook babbles nearby. You follow the sound until, around a bend, you see it. The monastery, not grand, not ostentatious, just sturdy stone buildings with modest stained glass and a bell tower that looks like it wants to mind its own business. The outer wall surrounds a garden, quiet and geometric. 2 monks prune herbs with the concentration of surgeons. You step through the gate. No one stops you. Visitors are expected from time to time. Travellers, pilgrims, the occasional runaway noble trying to find themselves. The air is thick with lavender and discipline. You slow your pace instinctively. Even your boots seem quieter on the flagstones. A novice meets you with a nod and a silent gesture. Follow. You do, slipping into the rhythm of the place. It's like entering another world, not just in space, but in time. Monasteries in the Middle Ages were clocks in human form. Everything ran on schedule. Prayers at dawn, work by mid-morning, more prayers, meals in silence, and, yes, more prayers. Monks were less free spirits and more spiritual engineers, keeping the divine engine ticking. You're taken to the refectory first. Breakfast is bread, a bit of cheese, and the kind of porridge that tastes like regret. No one speaks. A reader stands at a lectern, reciting passages from scripture in a voice so monotone it could put caffeine to sleep. You chew in sync with the text. After breakfast, you're shown the scriptorium, and this is where things really start humming. Imagine a room filled with long wooden desks, sunlight streaming through narrow windows, and monks hunched over parchment with ink-stained fingers, the smell of vellum, candle wax, and patience. This is where the magic happens, where knowledge is preserved line by painstaking line. A monk named Brother Alric lets you sit beside him. He's copying a psalter, and his script is so perfect it looks printed. You ask, in a whisper, how long it takes to complete a single book. He smiles without looking up. Months, sometimes years, no mistakes allowed. If you blot the ink, you start again. If your lines waver, it's considered a flaw not just in form but in soul. Some books are richly illuminated, gold leaf, vibrant dyes, tiny figures dancing in margins. Others are plain, for use and wear. Either way, each letter matters. Historians still argue whether the work of these scribes was purely devotional or if some monks snuck in quiet resistance, altered lines, hidden jokes. There's evidence of both. Marginalia occasionally includes cats knocking over ink pots, bored monks doodling knights fighting snails, or the all-time classic, I am very cold. You help prepare the ink. It's made from oak galls, crushed and soaked in wine or vinegar. The colour is dark and enduring. The tools are simple. Quills sharpened just so, blades to scrape away errors, and steady hands that tremble only in prayer. After the scriptorium, you walk through the cloister. Stone arches frame a square garden, each footstep echoing slightly off the walls. It's meditative. You pass a monk weeding between cabbages with the reverence of a philosopher. Another tends to bees. Bees were a big deal. Monasteries needed wax for candles, and honey sweetened both food and theology. The chapter house comes next. Here, the monks gather to discuss business, confess mistakes, and hear readings. You're allowed to sit in the back. A debate is underway, whether the roof tiles on the east dormitory are improperly aligned. It's intense. One monk pulls out a measuring string. Another refers to the rule of Saint Benedict like a lawyer citing precedent. These rules, by the way, govern everything. Silence, obedience, humility. The idea is to remove distraction and ego so that the divine can echo louder in the soul. It's not always successful. Brother Thomas clearly has thoughts about the lentil stew, but the discipline is real. You're invited to help in the herbarium. Rows of plants grow in neat beds, mint, sage, rosemary, comfrey. A monk teaches you which leaves treat fever, which cure burns, which definitely shouldn't be eaten unless you enjoy spontaneous spiritual departure. Medieval monasteries were centers of medicine, and often the only place someone could receive care that wasn't just pray harder and apply leeches. You grind some herbs, carefully. In the afternoon, the bell rings again. Time for more prayer. You're led to the chapel. The choir begins to chant, Gregorian, low and winding, like smoke made of sound. You sit at the back, eyes closed, letting it wash over you. No instruments. Just voices in unison, lifting and falling like waves. It's easy to lose yourself here. No deadlines. No noise, just ritual, rhythm, and the occasional goose wandering into the courtyard like it owns the place. The day closes with a simple supper. More bread, a bit of stew, no meat today, Friday. Again the meal is eaten in silence. Again the reader drones on, this time with a dramatic tale of a saint who converted a werewolf. You blink. Did he say werewolf? No one reacts. Maybe it's the porridge talking. After supper, you're given a straw-filled cot in the guest quarters. A candle flickers beside you. Outside, the night is still. You hear an owl, and somewhere distant, a monk coughs softly in his sleep. You lie back. The monastery is more than a building. It's a world within a world, a place where time loops gently around itself, where thoughts quiet down and work becomes prayer. Where books are birthed like children, and silence speaks louder than sermons. You let your eyes close. Tomorrow the road will call again. But for tonight, the chants linger in your ears, soft as lullabies in a language older than dreams. Section 17. The morning in the monastery arrives not with a clamour, but a hum. Bells, not urgent, not grand, just a soft call to wake, chime across the grounds, shaking dew off the leaves and coaxing birds from their perches. You stretch under your woolen blanket, yawn into the candle-smudged morning, and step back into your boots with only a minor protest from your knees. Time to return to the outside world. You leave behind the thick stone walls and the rhythmic order of monastic life with a small part of you still echoing in Gregorian chant. Back on the path, fields roll lazily around you. The road is rutted and muddy again, of course, and your destination today is a little less spiritual and a lot more pungent. You're headed to a medieval tannery. Now brace yourself. If the monastery was a serene bubble of intellect and prayer, the tannery is the exact opposite. It's loud, it's wet, and it smells like a cow exploded and nobody cleaned it up for a week. Because, in a way, that's exactly what's going on. As you approach the outskirts of a smaller village, the unmistakable stench punches you directly in the soul. The tanners have set up by the riverbank because, trust me, nobody wants them anywhere near a town centre. They need water and a place to dump the unfortunate leftovers of their process. And oh, are there leftovers? You watch from the edge of the workyard as several workers, mostly men in stained aprons, plunge animal hides into large vats. The first vat is full of lime and water, which helps strip away hair and fat. The second, that's where things get medieval. Quite literally, it's full of urine. You blink, you sniff. You regret it, and yes, your nose isn't lying to you. Fresh human urine, collected from nearby homes. Even paid for sometimes. Talk about side hustles. Why? Because ammonia in urine softens the hides and preps them for further stretching and working. A fringe detail, certainly, but historically accurate. So when people wax poetic about the romance of medieval craftsmanship, just remember, there's a man right now stomping barefoot in pee to help make your future leather shoes. Historians still argue whether tanners were truly social outcasts or simply necessary evils that people tolerated from a hygienic distance. Some towns made them live on the outskirts, others just banned them from church. Either way, you wouldn't invite them to dinner, not unless the plague had lowered your standards. The hides, once scrubbed, go into another vat, this one packed with a mix of bark, water, and thyme. Tannins in oak or chestnut bark help preserve the leather, make it flexible and durable. The smell improves slightly, but not by much. It's like masking a garbage fire with a cinnamon candle. You chat with one of the workers. His name's Osric. He's missing a few teeth and sports arms as thick as bread loaves. He laughs when you ask how long it takes to finish one piece of leather. Depends, he shrugs. Weather, patience, and the mood of the cows. Turns out leather isn't just for shoes. Tanners produce hides for belts, bags, book covers, armor straps, and more. And while it's filthy work, it pays, enough to feed a family and maybe afford an extra egg once in a while. But it comes at a price. No one forgets you're a tanner. Even when you try to clean up, the smell clings like guilt. You help Osric stir a vat. It's heavy, your arms ache instantly, the water sloshes, and some of it lands on your boot. It begins. You will never be clean again. After that, he shows you the drying racks, stretched skins pinned up like spooky laundry across a field. The sun helps dry and cure them, turning what was once raw flesh into workable material. Flies dance in lazy spirals. A dog nearby stares at you like it knows what you stepped in. Not everything is grotesque. There's a strange beauty to the process too. The hides, once treated, are supple and warm to the touch. Dyed and oiled, they become tools, garments, books, things that last. There's a dignity in taking something that once lived and making it useful again. As midday settles in, Osric offers you a piece of flatbread with onion and something that might be goat. You eat together under the awning, and he tells you about the time his cousin tried to start a perfume shop next to the tannery. It lasted 3 hours. You ask if he ever wanted to do something else. He shrugs. This is what I know. This, and how to play the recorder badly. Fair enough. Before leaving, you're shown the final step, softening. The leather is rubbed, kneaded, even chewed in some traditions. Osric assures you they don't do that here. You raise an eyebrow. He laughs. You suspect he's lying. You walk away that afternoon with a small scrap of tanned hide given to you as a souvenir. It still smells. You put it in a pouch, very far from your lunch. The road rises again, and you look back. The tannery, grotesque and grimy, continues its rhythm. Stink or not, it's a vital part of life. Without it, there's no armor for the soldier, no boots for the traveler, no belts to keep breeches from betraying you in public. By twilight, the village is behind you. Trees stretch ahead. The air is clean again, blessedly, gloriously clean. You take a deep breath and nearly cry with relief, but you also feel oddly thankful. Because medieval life wasn't just castles and cloisters, it was sweat and filth and function, it was jobs no one wanted but everyone needed. Tanners didn't write the histories, but they were written on their wares. The breeze picks up, and you keep walking. Your boots, by the way. They're leather. Section 18. Your nose finally recovers somewhere near midnight. You've walked for hours, letting the stink of the tannery be absorbed, hopefully by every passing tree and obliging gust of wind. You even tried dragging your boots through a patch of thyme. It helped a little. Not enough, but a little. Eventually, your road cuts through gently sloping hills. Distant torchlight flickers from a cluster of buildings atop one. A castle. No, too small, probably a manor house. But you're not heading there tonight. Instead, you veer into a flatter stretch of open land and toward another humble, vital cog in the medieval machine. A mill. Now, don't yawn just yet. Because medieval mills, watermills to be specific, were marvels of low-key engineering. Sure, they weren't flashy, no stained glass or soaring spires. But without them, your daily bread would have stayed as grainy as a bad dream. And this one, it's running even now, long after sunset, powered by the constant turn of the river. You approach it by moonlight, the wheel already in motion, large, wet, and creaking like it knows secrets. The water rushes past, cold and constant. Inside the mill house, candlelight glows through wooden slats. You knock. A muffled curse answers. Then the door swings open. Meet Edith. She's short, broad-shouldered, and deeply unimpressed by your face. What do you want? To see the mill, you say. She squints. You're not another tax agent, are you? You swear on your last clean sock. She considers, then nods you inside. The mill smells of damp grain and burnt oil. Gears clunk like stubborn old men. A vertical shaft turns slowly in the middle of the room, powered by the water wheel outside. Attached to it are grindstones, huge, flat discs of rock, one turning over the other, crushing grain into flour like a medieval Vitamix with a grudge. You can barely hear yourself think. Edith gestures to the hopper, a wooden funnel feeding grain into the stones. Wheat today, could be rye tomorrow, or barley. Depends what the villagers bring. Turns out this mill serves the surrounding hamlets. Peasants bring their harvest, wait for their turn, and leave with flour. A cut goes to the lord of the manor. Another to the miller, Edith. The rest, that's dinner for the family. Hopefully, you watch as she adjusts the flow. Too much grain and it chokes the grind. Too little and it wastes power. She does it all by feel. No gauges, no numbers, just the instinct of someone who's listened to stone and water for decades. It's oddly beautiful. The rhythm, the repetition, the smell of flour thick in the air, settling on everything like snow. You taste it in your teeth. Your eyebrows are probably half pastry by now. She explains that watermills came to England by the Roman period, but really took off in the Middle Ages. They transformed rural economies, doing the work of dozens of people in a fraction of the time. Some monasteries had their own, so did lords. Even towns built municipal ones, charging fees for use. Historians still argue whether mills made life easier or just shifted who held the power. A lord could easily abuse the system, raising prices, forcing people to use only his mill. Others saw it as communal progress. Technology with a wooden paddle and a sly tax, and you know what's amazing? The ingenuity. Some mills powered not just grindstones but hammers for blacksmiths, trip hammers for cloth production, even bellows for furnaces. The wheel was the original multitasker, a medieval iPhone with splash damage. Edith gestures for you to try. You step up, place a bucket under the flour chute and steady the hopper. The grindstones drone above you. The whole building shudders gently like a cat purring in its sleep. Flour pours out, warm and powdery. You almost sneeze, but Edith glares, so you don't. She tells you about the great flood of 15 years ago, washed out the wheel completely, took weeks to rebuild. Thought we'd starve, she mutters, tapping the stones with the reverence of someone who's buried too many hopes under failed harvests. Outside, the stars have multiplied. A full moon gleams off the water. You step out for air and spot a fox watching from the underbrush. It blinks at you, unimpressed, and disappears. Back inside, Edith prepares for the last batch of the night. You help pour grain. She says her father was a miller and his mother before him. Not glamorous, she adds, but better than fieldwork. And flour doesn't argue back. You laugh. She doesn't. Before leaving, she hands you a sack of flour. Not much, but enough for a few loaves. A gift, or maybe a bribe so you don't tell the Lord she let you in. Either way, you thank her and step back into the night. Your boots crunch over the damp earth. The mill turns behind you, steady and timeless. No bells, no rituals, just the endless dance of river and stone, grain and grind. Tomorrow, it'll start again, just as it has for centuries. Long after you're gone, long after the manor burns or the fields are replanted, that wheel might still turn. And bread? Bread will always matter. You pass under a tree and feel something soft hit your cheek. You freeze. Bird, dew, no. Just flour from your collar, shaken loose by the wind. You sigh, wipe your face, and keep walking. Tomorrow you'll visit a manor house. There'll be nobles and noise and niceties, but tonight it's just you, your flour-stained sleeves, and the echo of the mill, grinding, grinding, as steady as breath. Section 19. You walk through the early morning mist with the smug confidence of someone who now knows how flour is made. The landscape begins to shift again, less peasant, more prestige. Stone walls emerge like ancient teeth along the roadside, and you spot the outlines of a manor house through a screen of oak trees. This isn't a castle. Not quite, but it's the next best thing for a medieval landowner with cash, status, and perhaps a small chip on his shoulder. The manor stands proud on a slight rise, its high windows blinking in the morning sun. Flags flutter, not royal ones, personal heraldry, a boar on a red field. Fierce, noble, and mildly terrifying if you've ever actually met a boar. You trudge up the gravel path, passing rows of hedges trimmed with painful precision. Two boys in matching tunics chase a goose down the lawn. The goose is winning. At the door, a steward intercepts you. Tall, unimpressed, and armed with a waxed moustache you could probably use to store a scroll. State your business. I'm just visiting. Curious about daily life. He blinks. You're not a tax collector, are you? Seriously, how many times, after some intense squinting and a stern warning not to steal the spoons, he lets you in. Inside, the air is cool and scented with rushes and lavender. Thick walls muffle sound, and you're immediately struck by the contrast to the inn, the village, and even the monastery. Here, life feels curated, comfortable. Until you spot the kitchen boy sprinting past with a bleeding nose and a half-plucked pheasant. Yep, still medieval. Your host is Lord Alric. He's in his 50s, bearded, fond of wine before breakfast, and sporting a velvet doublet that screams, "I own people." He greets you warmly, and within minutes is recounting how he once broke his leg, jousting while drunk, at a wedding. On a dare, you like him immediately. He insists on giving you a tour, starting with the hall, the main room of the house and the beating heart of manor life. This is where meals happen, court cases are heard, gossip blooms like mold on cheese, and visiting dignitaries get mildly poisoned by undercooked eel. Long trestle tables line the space. The high table, where Lord Alric dines, is raised on a dais because power tastes better when you look down your nose while eating it. He explains the manor's structure. The estate includes villages, farmland, forests, and sometimes entire hamlets. Peasants work the land, paying rent in labour, crops, or coin. The steward oversees operations, and Alric, well, he mostly manages things from a distance, which seems to involve hawking, eating, and losing at chess. Historians still argue whether manor lords were effective managers or glorified freeloaders with excellent branding. The truth? Probably somewhere between spreadsheet and splendor. You're led to the kitchen next. It's chaos. A cook screams about insolent onions. A boy chops parsley like it owes him money. Boiling pots hiss, a pig turns on a spit, and someone's dropped something that sounds disturbingly crunchy. Your stomach growls. Lord Alric, amused, offers a light breakfast. This translates to roasted duck leg, hard cheese, warm bread, mill flour, thank you very much, and wine. Always wine. Afterward, you wander the manor grounds. A herb garden buzzes with bees. A falconer waves at you with a gloved hand, a bird of prey sulking on his wrist. In a smaller building, scribes copy texts, legal documents, estate ledgers, the occasional poem if someone's feeling fancy. Alric admits somewhat sheepishly that he can't read Latin. You nod sympathetically. Who can? You spend part of the day watching how things tick. Carpenters repair fences, stable boys muck stalls, maids air bedding from the guest chambers, often infested with lice. Everyone knows their role. The manor, despite its polish, is a working machine, no cog too small. You spot a young noblewoman, Lady Aelith, Alric's niece, practicing lute beneath a pear tree. She's talented, sharp-eyed, and suspicious of strangers who smell faintly of urine, flour, and disappointment. Still, she asks if you know poetry. You recite a silly rhyme about pigeons and socks. She does not laugh. Awkward silence. She hands you a lute and walks away. Later in the Great Hall you watch a minor court case. Two peasants argue over a pig that allegedly wandered into the wrong cabbage patch. Alric listens with the gravity of a high judge of pancake law. He rules in favor of the pig, mostly because he wants to end it before lunch. That evening, you sit beside the hearth with Alric and a few of his retainers. Stories flow, some true, some definitely not. Someone claims to have seen a sea monster off the Cornish coast. Another swears a local widow is secretly a witch who turns cows into moss. You say nothing. You've met weirder people. Before bed, Alric shows you one last marvel, the manor's private chapel. It's small but lovely. Painted saints peer down with wide, patient eyes. Candles flicker in niches. It smells of incense and lemon oil. He pauses, thoughtful. It's not much, he says. But it's ours. Land, people, chapel. A world in miniature. And that's the truth of it. The manor isn't just a house, it's a universe with its own laws, rhythms, loyalties, and absurdities. It sustains those inside and relies on those outside. Everyone fits somewhere, even if not always fairly. As you lay in the guest chamber that night, under linen sheets, on a straw mattress, probably crawling with 10,000 invisible roommates, you realize something. This is the most comfortable you've been in days. The fire crackles. Beyond the window, the boar banner flutters in the night wind. You drift off wondering whether pigs really can sue each other in Cabbage Court. Stranger things have happened. Section 20. You wake to the sound of bells, not the harsh clang of alarm, but a gentle peal drifting from a distant chapel. Morning fog curls against the manor's stone walls. A fire has already been rekindled in your hearth, and a serving boy has left a basin of warm water by the door. Luxury. You briefly consider never leaving, but duty or curiosity or possibly sheer momentum calls you onward. Today you're leaving the manor and returning to a quieter place. Not the tavern, not the market, and definitely not the tanner's quarter, never again. This time your feet take you toward the outskirts of the village, to a cottage at the edge of cultivated land, nestled against the woods. Because tonight your journey closes with the beating heart of medieval survival, the peasant household. You find the cottage just after midday. It's squat, timber-framed, with daub and wattle walls and a roof thatch patched with moss and hope. Smoke curls from the chimney. A chicken eyes you suspiciously, then loses interest. You knock. A moment later the door opens. A woman, maybe 30, maybe 50, it's hard to tell, wipes her hands on an apron. You're not here to collect anything, are you? You sigh. No. Just here to learn. She shrugs and waves you in. Fine. You can help peel turnips. Inside it's warm and dark. A central hearth glows with steady fire. One room serves as kitchen, bedroom, and living space. There's a low table, 3 stools, and a curtain behind which you assume someone sleeps or stores turnips. Hard to say. Her name is Maud. Her husband, Ralph, is out working a strip of common field. Their children are nearby, 2 girls helping with wool carding, 1 boy frowning at a puzzle involving 2 sticks and a stubborn goat. You sit beside the hearth and begin to peel. This is the rhythm of peasant life, slow, repetitive, unglamorous, and absolutely essential. They rise with the sun, tend animals, plough shared land, gather firewood, mend clothes, pay taxes, survive winters, and repeat. It's hard work every day, every season, no weekends. No holidays unless the church says so, and even then you're probably just working for someone else's feast. Maud explains how the cottage is hers only insofar as it's part of the Lord's estate. They owe labour, working his fields several days a week. The rest of the time they grow enough to feed themselves, hopefully. Some years that hopefully becomes barely, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all. Historians still argue whether peasant life was miserable drudgery or a mix of hardship and quiet dignity. The truth, of course, is both. Some lords were cruel, some weren't, some years were full of blight, taxes, and heartbreak. Others brought decent harvests and stories by the fire. And here's the thing, community mattered. You didn't survive the Middle Ages alone. You bartered eggs for wool, you helped mend your neighbour's roof, You shared bread during lean winters, or drank together after harvest, or cursed the tax collector as one. Maud ladles out a thin soup, vegetables, a sliver of bacon, herbs from her garden. It's hot, salty, and shockingly good. Her daughter offers you a hunk of coarse bread. I helped grind the flour, she says proudly. You smile. Tough job. I know a lady named Edith. After lunch, Ralph returns. He's sunburned and silent at first, then warms up once he realizes you're not here to seize his cow or demand extra grain. He talks about planting schedules, how they rotate fields year to year to avoid exhausting the soil. Strip farming, he calls it. Shared land, but organized. Each family gets a few strips, some close, some far, all carefully measured. It's efficient, if backbreaking, no tractors, just oxen, wooden plows, and prayer. You step outside while the kids chase geese. Ralph follows, pointing toward the forest. See that line of trees? He asks. Used to be full of wolves. You blink. No more now, he adds. Too many people. Not that I miss 'em. The sun begins to set. Chickens shuffle into their coop. A cow lows from a small paddock nearby. The sky turns the colour of ripe plums. Maud lights a lantern and hangs it near the door. Inside, the children are preparing the sleeping mats. Everyone sleeps in the same room. Privacy? That's for lords. Here, you learn to share space, air, food, everything. One child yawns and curls into a blanket. Another asks for a story. Ralph obliges, telling a tale of a knight who challenged death to a wrestling match and lost because death cheated. Tied his shoelaces together, he says with a grin. You sit quietly as the fire pops and crackles. No finery, no banners, no grand titles or velvet robes. Just a family ending another long, exhausting, utterly ordinary day, and yet it's not so ordinary. This, more than the Lord's feasts or the monks' candles, is medieval life. Messy, hard, shared. You've walked through cathedrals and courtyards, markets and mills, but this hearth, flickering, low, surrounded by sleepy kids and scraped bowls, feels truer than all the rest. As you prepare to leave, Maud presses something into your hand. It's a woolen glove. One. Just the right. In case it gets cold, she says, and smiles. You don't have the heart to say you already have gloves. You just say thank you. You walk back through the darkening fields. The sky is velvet. A single owl hoots from the forest edge. Somewhere far behind, a child laughs in their sleep, and you realize you made it. You didn't die of plague or sword or dysentery. You peeled turnips. You flirted with tuberculosis. You watched pig court. You smelled things you will never forget. You lived a day in medieval England. You will sleep well tonight. Now, the journey ends. Your feet are sore, your clothes are dusted in flour and faintly scented with turnip, and your mind is thick with the echo of bells, market cries, and quiet prayers. But the noise has faded now, hasn't it? It's just you and the hush of night settling in. Take a slow breath. Let it drift. Imagine the warmth of a hearth, the kind built stone by stone, where firelight dances against a low ceiling and casts soft shadows on weary faces. You're there again, on the edge of sleep, wrapped in wool, listening to the quiet breathing of a cottage as the wind nudges the thatch roof. The manor is far away. The monastery bells are silent. Even the mill has stopped its groaning rhythm. All that remains is the soft, steady exhale of a world gone still. You did well. You made it through the market's chaos, the tavern's noise, the tannery's odour. You saw fields tilled by hands older than time, tasted bread made from grain crushed by water and stone, and sat among people who measured life not in years but in seasons. And in this moment, none of it is asking anything from you. There's nothing left to remember, no timeline, no facts to file away. Just that lingering feeling, the weight of history, the rhythm of daily life long faded, and how it brushed against your skin just softly enough to make it real. Let the world dim, let your thoughts slow. The fire is nearly out, but not quite. A few embers glow like stars beneath ash. The wind outside sighs through trees that have stood since long before you arrived and will keep standing long after. You are still, you are warm, you are home for now. Sleep well.